Being an artist isn't easy, but it's not hopeless either. And as you watch me draw these in this video series, learn all of the most popular problems that artists have to wrestle with, how to overcome them, and how you can step into being the best artist you were born to be. And that all starts with the ugliest demon. Let me ask you, are you a procrastinator? Because here's how you can blow past procrastination. Now let's examine some core issues and misconceptions that you're definitely struggling with from being a procrastinator. Because when you're procrastinating and when people know that you're a procrastinator, what happens to you? You get labeled, and you get labeled as you're lazy. You just don't want to do anything. You can't get off your butt. You're never accomplishing your dreams. You won't move out of your mom's basement, and you just don't care either, right? You just don't care about what you're doing. Oh, you just don't care enough. And all of that is so misperceived, and it's just false, okay? So if you're struggling with this right now, and tell me if this is you, it really actually doesn't help you to think that way, nor to be called that, because all that does is just further ingrain you into this identity as a procrastinator. Did you know that? And so what I want to just shed some light on is the fact that that's not true at all. You do care. The issue, though, is that oftentimes procrastinators actually care too much. And when you care about what you have planned, when you care about what you want to do, or that project, or that commission, or that destiny that you want to run towards, it's not that you don't care about it, it's just that you care to such a degree that you're a little paralyzed by it. But here's the thing, is that because you care so much, it's easier for you to take no action than to take action and be disappointed by it. Because at the core of what procrastination is a mask for your insecurity, because you're not sure what you're going to do is going to work out. You're not sure that what you're actually striving for is actually going to be fruitful for you. And all of that, my friend, is just enveloped in massive insecurity and doubt and fear and anxiety. And I'm gonna give you some real practical tips and strategies as we go through this video so that you can knock through this. But listen, the whole reason that anybody procrastinates is only for two reasons. It's either to protect themselves from pain, or it's something that they're gonna deem as unnecessary or unimportant. And for you, art is important, isn't it? But if you're a procrastinator on your artwork, the reality is just that it's going to shield you from disappointment, from putting off what you need to do rather than investing into it. And if you wanna invest into it, here's what you need to start to realize. Now, as you're procrastinating, you're definitely going to start to take a look at what you want to do. Maybe it's a big personal project. You want to start that manga. Maybe you want to start that animation project. Maybe you want to start to create some concept art because you want to go work for Blizzard or Riot, right? And you're going to take a look at that task and you're just going to go, oh, that's a lot to do, right? Have you ever done this? The reason why this is so hard for you to overcome isn't the task, but it's just the fact that you're overwhelmed thinking about the entire task. You're thinking about the entire project, and you're thinking about all 28 pages of your comic, and you're thinking about the entire release of your Etsy shop, and you're thinking about the entire portfolio that you have to make for this or that. And to give you an analogy on how to overcome this, just think about it like this. You don't sit down at a steak dinner, put the fork in, and then shove it into your mouth all in one bite, do you? Right? No, heck no. You don't sit down in front of a piece of chicken and just go, oh my God, this is so much. I can't do it. It's just so overwhelming. Oh man, my anxiety is really ticking up right now. Of course you don't. So therefore, if you sit there and you apply that same exact strategy that you know what to do with it into your artwork, it will automatically just annihilate all those feelings. What you got to do is just take baby steps towards it, okay? You're not going to take a look at your entire project. You're not going to take a look at the entire portfolio. You're not going to take a look at the entire comic you have to do and sit there and be overwhelmed by it all. No, friend. Instead, just take a look at what are the smallest steps that I can take, and we'll talk about what that can be in a minute, but just what are some baby steps I can do? Because if you start to take a look at things in smaller chunks, it's so much easier to tackle. And then one of the things that I tend to really recommend a lot of people do, and they have a lot of success with this, is to just create a big, huge itemized list. You can do this one in two formats. You can either just list it all out in bullet points, or if you're more of a type B person, go ahead and create some sticky notes with each individual task, and you kind of just put it all up over a wall or a bulletin board, whatever you got there. When you start to view it like that, it makes it so much easier for your brain to compartmentalize. This is what I have to do in order to start to work on it. And then you don't feel that resistance of procrastination telling you like, oh, it's so much, you're never gonna do it. Because you can take a look at it and be like, I do that, I do that, I do that. And in the same frame of thought as your food analogy, you're not gonna look at the entire plate, you're just gonna look at each individual bite. Try it out. Now, at certain points, you are just gonna get slammed with those feelings of procrastination. You are just going to be consumed by doubt. And listen, I totally understand you. I doubted that I could ever do anything on this platform. I doubted I could ever get clients. I doubted I could ever get what I currently have right now. I doubted that I could ever have a family. But one of the best things that you can ever do, and I learned that you can start to channel your energy in the right and positive direction, is execute what I call 5-minute decisions. You've got your entire assembled list of here's every little thing that I can do, okay? And I don't just mean, by the way, of like, okay, make an entire chapter of my webcomic. No, sometimes it'll be like, sketch these characters, make the layout, sketch page 1. Just take a look at, okay, in the next 5 minutes, what can I start to do? And if you start to take a look at where can I start to go, where can I start to channel all my energy, a beautiful thing happens, my friend. You start to build momentum, like a train taking off, chugga, 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 chugga. You know, that's exactly what momentum is. It's from you going from a completely stop state and then you slowly moving that power towards you actually completing tasks. And again, oftentimes we're gonna take a look at the entirety of the task and be like, oh my God, it's gonna take so much time to do this. But listen, that's where a force that we're gonna talk about in a minute comes into play here, and I'm gonna teach you how to combat it, but you just need to focus on how do I build momentum? Because if you're focused on just little efforts and just doing little bits at a time, you are gonna be able to blast through it. And so just thinking about how you can gain momentum, much like if you have a stop car and you have to push it up a hill, it's gonna suck at first, but then the more little efforts that you execute, the closer you're gonna get to your goal. How's that sound? Now, the next thing you wanna do in order to beat your procrastination is hit that like and subscribe, because I'm here for you every week to give you practical, actionable tips so that you can be the artist that you wanna be, and I know that you can. And if this is helping you, please share it with somebody that you know. And now, learn about this too. Now, I want to introduce this concept to you that is really revolutionary, and I think it's going to help you better frame your entire approach as you're going to get into this. So oftentimes when we're too focused on how we feel, we're going to be focusing on all of these doubts and anxieties and reasons to feel depressed about ourselves. And that just relates to this concept of what's called being on self, being on purpose. And when you're on self, you're just consumed by what you're currently thinking and feeling. But all of that, I just want to let you know, friend, it's never going to help you. You will never ever grow. You will never ascend to the level that you want to by giving into your fear, by giving into your doubts, by giving into your anxieties, by giving into your depressive modes and thoughts. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's so prevalent in a few minutes. But for right now, I just want you to understand, like, that's just you being on self. In the present moment, you don't want to do it. So versus on purpose, this is going to shift your perspective so that you understand that everything that you're doing is part of a greater purpose. So what is your purpose, my friend? Is it that you want to go ahead and you want to create that comic book? Is it that you want to start to develop your own IP with your own original characters into it? Is it that you want to start to create some major illustrations and attract some freelance work? And that is your purpose in this life, because you feel a really deep and meaningful resonance with what you're doing. You like that work. It's not that you don't like it, you love it. But again, you care a little bit too much and you're afraid it's not going to work out for you. But that fear is what's holding you back from doing it. And instead of you shifted to, no, this is my purpose. I want to do this because this labor will relate to my purpose and my mission of doing this. And just to put this into perspective for you, like for those of you that are parents like me, I don't come home from a bad day of work and my kids are like, Daddy, we're hungry. Can you feed us? I'm like, no, Daddy's not feeling it today. I don't know. I'd rather play video games. Like, we ate yesterday. Do we have to do that again? No, because my mission is to be a provider for them. Nor are you at work and your boss is like, hey, I need that report now. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I'm not really in a good frame of mind for this one. That's not what you do, because your mission there is to be a contributor for that company, for that business, and to provide for your family, or at least for yourself if you're an individual, okay? So if you shift yourself to, I'm not just doing this For me, I'm doing this for a greater good, and I see myself as part of a grander scheme. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So the next time you start to procrastinate, I want you to ask yourself, am I paying attention to myself or am I paying attention to my purpose? And here's what you can do to start to knock into that too. Now, in battling your procrastination, there's a really big omnipresent force that you're probably not aware of, but it's literally influencing you. And I just want to be honest and just say that every single time that I start any project, I have intense dread and anxiety. I don't know if I can do it. I'm not sure about it. I'm afraid that the client's not gonna like it. I'm afraid I'm not gonna like it, or it's not gonna be enjoyable, or I'm gonna have to make a bunch of changes to it, or what if my vision gets tainted? I feel all of that every single time. And I've been doing this for over a decade, and it never goes away. So if you're feeling this, my friend, let me just tell you, it's nothing special. It's not unique to you. It's literally in every single artist, and especially me. But the reason why we feel that way is this pretty basic force that's called resistance. And anything that you want to do that's really going to be something that you should do in your life is going to be met with resistance. And that's going to be why it's so hard for you to get into it. Because when you actually set yourself on a path, you start to feel this force that's like, no, not today. No. Let's do that instead. No. This isn't the right time. It's not the right moment. It's not the right time in your life. Oh my God, you're so busy. Oh, you don't feel good. Oh, you're so tired all the time. You are going to come up with so many reasons for you not to do it. And that is this force of resistance for you, okay? And this is heavily detailed in the Stephen Pressfield book, The War for Art. And I really recommend you give it a read because I think it'll blow your mind. But the issue with that is that, just like I said earlier, that you should make 5-minute decisions to establish momentum, giving into resistance establishes negative momentum. And when you have negative momentum, it doesn't become easier for you to make decisions and to actually make productive efforts. It becomes easier for you to not. And every single time that you give into this, you're developing a habit of you giving up on yourself and you giving up on your dreams and you living a life that's honestly a lot less than what you're capable of. So do you want that, friend? Because what I want to let you know is that there's no real obstacles, but you're going to come up with a plethora of obstacles, and they're all invented ones, and we'll talk about that in a minute as to why. Now, can we be really honest? So when you say that you're a procrastinator and you adopt that title, you don that mantle of it, you're not doing nothing, are you, friend? No. What are you doing? And that's something that I think is heavily overlooked by you, okay? And at the core of why it's so hard for procrastinators to get over their procrastinating habits, and first off, you do have to identify it's a habit. It's not a nature. You're doing something else, aren't you? You're not just saying, I'm gonna procrastinate on this today, or maybe you're not even thinking that. Maybe you're just feeling so overwhelmed by your doubts that you start to do what? You channel your energy elsewhere. No, I'm gonna take a nap. No, I'm gonna play video games. No, I'm gonna watch this show. No, I'm gonna watch Netflix instead. No, I'm gonna do this or that. There we go. You see what you just did there? What you just did is you overindulged in your emotions. And why is that? Because we as human beings, we are complete gluttons for comfort, and you're nothing special on that note. Because what happens very naturally is that you're gonna take a look at that task and say, that sounds hard. Video games are so fun. You're gonna go ahead and switch that task, switch that energy, rechannel that, divert all of your interest, divert all of your energy into something that you really know it doesn't matter. You beating Elden Ring, nobody cares. You're not that impressive, but you view that as, oh, that's so much better. That's so much more fun. I can do that. That's gonna be comforting. This, I don't know if it's gonna be comforting. I don't know if anyone's gonna buy my stuff. I don't know if I'm gonna sell anything on my Etsy shop. I don't know if anyone's gonna wanna hire me. And this all stems from this mindset that's really pervasive that a lot of people promote nowadays, which is this object of self-care where you're just like, oh, well, I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like I'm in a good mindset. I don't feel like this is the right thing for me to do, or I'm just not in a good mode of thought today, so I just shouldn't do it. To combat that, that's not actually self-care. That's self-coddling, okay? And this is pretty well documented. It's not just my opinion on the matter, But when you're in this mode, it's just you giving into your impulses. It's just you feeding into whatever whim that you happen to feel like. And if you really want to beat your procrastination, you have to beat your whims. You can't just treat art like it's something that you do when you feel like it, like it's just some flippant hobby, especially if you have something really deep and meaningful. And this also ties into that being on self or being on purpose, because if you're on self, yeah, you're totally overindulgent in your emotional state. You're overindulgent into your comfort too, versus you're on purpose. You have to realize that if you're on purpose, you're going to have to go through some type of voluntary suffering for it, because you can go ahead and suffer a little bit now and enjoy a lot later, or you can enjoy a little bit now and have it suck a lot later. Which one do you want? Now, contributing to how you're going to get over this is the fact that you're maybe not considering how your actions will contribute to the greater good. And what I mean by that is just the world. Like, you making any type of artistic product, you making any type of artistic effort doesn't just affect you. What I want to really urge you to consider is this question: why are you doing what you're doing? Why? And you need to have a deep reason why. Kevin Hart says that if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not strong enough. And one of the strategies that I typically employ with people in my mentorship that are kind of struggling with procrastinating, or if they're not sure why they're doing what they're doing, or if they're not sure if they really want to dedicate themselves, is I have them go through the strategy, which is called an onion. And when you think of an onion, it's got multiple layers to it. Really easy to do is you just go ahead and you write at least 7 lines. It can be greater than that, but no more than 10, okay? And you just want to go ahead and ask yourself, why? Why is this important? And then question it again. Why is that important? And then question that. Why is that important? And you need to avoid surface level answers. So just to give you an example here, I'm going to tell you some of the worst reasons why people think that they want to make what they want to make. Okay. So here's a good one. So you might say, well, I want to make art so that I can make everybody in the world happy. No, you won't. You won't. You can't affect everybody, all right? You're not a wizard, friend. You can't make everybody happy. Terrible reason. Or how about this? I want to be a freelancer so that I can make money. Okay, but we're still surface level here. You're not telling me what the greater good, and it doesn't focus onto you. Or how about this, John? I want to start an art YouTube channel so I can make money and start a Patreon. Okay, that's the worst, most surface level reason, and I can tell you that's why you're going to quit your channel, because I've seen it. All of these, they don't actually relate to you. A why has to do with something deep and selfish within you. I know we think of selfishness as a pejorative nowadays, but it's not. You do have to care for yourself, and there has to be a deep, meaningful connection to it. And I'm just gonna give you an example. You want an example? Here we go. The reason why I create my YouTube content is because I view this, and I've gone through this entire process too. I view my YouTube channel right now as my living memorial, because one of the things I think is really sad and tragic is that when people die, you tend to forget about them, don't you? You forget about what they look like, what they sound like, how they think, how they act, okay? But for me, putting my processes and putting my content and putting my knowledge out here is also a way for me to continuously, infinitely, so long as this platform exists, connect with my sons. Because I don't want them to forget. God forbid anything tragic were to happen to me, they would be able to log on here and watch endless hours of Dad. And they would never be able to forget what I look like, what I sound like, what I act like, how I think, what are my attitudes, what are my wisdoms in life I can share with them. And that is one of the things that I came to as far as why I'm putting out this content for you right now. And if you're enjoying this, by the way, please hit that like and subscribe button, because I would love to help and affect you in a similar way with that. But if you have a really deep-seated why are you doing this, it becomes almost impossible for you not to pursue it. How's that sound? Now, there's 2 people that I'm going to speak to right now, and I'm definitely going to address you because you exist somewhere in here. Because, man, it is so easy to just say, I'll do it later, I'll do it tomorrow, another time, yada, yada. And here's why. It's because you have too much comfort and you live very unstructured. So here are the 2 groups that we're going to be in. Do you work a full-time job, or do you just work in general? If you're working 9 to 5, and then you're coming home and you're not doing anything for yourself from 6 to 11, you're making somebody else's dream come true and you're sacrificing yours. Conversely, if you are somebody right now who is unemployed, maybe you live at home with your parents, maybe you're too young to move out on your own watching this, or maybe you're somebody, you've fallen on some hard times. I'm sorry to hear about that. But if you have an unstructured day and you're not pursuing the things, you gotta take a look at this. That's your fault. It's accountability. And it's also a matter of conditioning too, to think that you need to live your life in servitude to other people and give up yourself. and you're choosing to do that. And so what I want to introduce to you is that if you have a more accountable vision of yourself, that is not a bad thing. People don't like to be accountable, but here's the thing. Accountability brings you freedom. It brings you accomplishment. It brings you focus. It brings you determination. It brings you, what's that special word you love to hear? Motivation. You need to have an extreme accountability vision of yourself. When you succeed, that's your fault. When you don't stick to any type of a schedule, that's your fault too. Are you scheduling time for your artwork? Yes or no? Are you actually going through with that? Yes or no? Because it either is your fault or it's nobody else's fault. You can't sit there and blame, well, I couldn't do it today. Okay, great. Can you make it up throughout the week? So one of the best things that you can do on this note is take a look at your schedule. Think about it like this. How many hours do I want to spend making artwork? But then two, you have to sit there and say, how much time am I completely throwing away and wasting? How much time am I spending online? How much time am I wasting my time playing video games? How much time am I wasting my time watching Netflix? How much time am I spending scrolling through my phone? Honestly, take a good, honest look at yourself. And if your screen report trumps the amount of time that you spent on your artwork, whose fault is it really? I mean, let's be adults about it. We can do better. And I know you can too. Now, a key thing that you gotta know, and this is gonna contrast a lot of what you probably heard, but it's totally true. And I think one of the best popular media examples of this is in Inside Out 2. So if you've seen Inside Out 2, it introduces the character of anxiety, which you're feeling a lot of right now as you're a procrastinator. And there's one particular scene where all the characters have to go to like anxiety's main base of operation. And where is that? In the imagination. And so what this relates to is just the fact that you have to realize that anxiety is a natural instinct. It's a fear-based instinct that's supposed to keep you alive. But we don't have, most of the time at least, a lot of mortal threats in our life. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong. Does anybody have to worry about walking outside their house and being mauled by a saber-tooth tiger? Because I hope not. If that's not you, friend, realize this. Your anxiety exists in your imagination. Your anxiety is real to the degree that you give it power over you. Your anxiety is something that you can address, you can get better with, you can learn to control. It's not a deficiency in your character. It's not a deficiency in you as a person either. It is not something that is crippling, nor are you damned to just have to suffer through it for the rest of your life. And if we learn that when you feel the anxiety that you're not going to do that thing, you're not going to accomplish it, that you're always going to be what your mom or dad said you would or wouldn't be, then that is a story. And it's a story that you narrate to yourself. It's a story you construct. It's like a bad movie that you just play in your head over and over and over again, even though you know it sucks and you know how it ends. And one of the things I want to introduce to you is the idea that anxiety and progress are oppositional forces. They can't exist together. They won't exist because you have to choose which side is going to win every single time that you have that opportunity to work on yourself and to work towards your goals. Even though I have learned through my processes, and if you want to learn what those processes are, let me know down below, I'll make a video about it. I've learned how to battle through all of my anxieties through my artwork, even though, like I said, I feel it heavily at the start of every project. But if you want to be the person who is able to accomplish the things that you want to do, and you're feeling crippled, you're feeling like a victim of this, I just want to release you from that, friend. That's the story that you tell yourself because, why? Because it's easier for you not to make progress and to shield yourself from disappointment rather than maybe experience it a little bit as you're starting out your project and growing it through it. Because comfort, we are complete gluttons for it versus discomfort. Now, myself included, we all struggle with perfectionism, but what if you could weaponize that and use it to your advantage? Here's how. So at the core of being a perfectionist, okay, let's talk about your symptoms and what you're currently feeling. And then I'm going to tell you what you're actually feeling and what the real root cause of it is. Because as a perfectionist artist, what are you going to do? You're going to say that you're extremely slow, that you struggle to work on anything for long periods of time, that you struggle with maintaining your creativity, that you struggle with keeping up your motivation, right? You find yourself always getting to the same point and then, oh, something happens and boom, you just can't stick with it anymore. Am I right? Am I talking about you right now? And at the real root of perfectionism, You just have an issue not with making everything look as good as possible, not with you being a professional, not with you trying to level up everything that you do all the time, overwhelmingly, like I'm gonna warn you against as we go through this video today. But instead, it's real simple. You just have a problem with beginning and finishing things. Look, that's really all it is. It's real bare bones, basic and simple, is that you need to see yourself as starting something, and that is really the root cause of it, because you have these great ideas, you have these amazing conceptions of what you would like to do, what you would like to be, what you would like to do with it, what you like your project to turn into, right? And then you actually get hit with the actual work and something happens. There's a disconnect that occurs. And then you start to meander through these perfectionism kind of mindsets and habits like I'll talk to you about today. And that's really what it is. But at the core of it, it is just starting something and investing something all the way through. And I'm not going to be ambiguous about this. I'm going to let you know exactly how you can and should combat this in order to be more successful. Now, let me ask, at what point do you feel like you actually start to adopt this mindset that you are a perfectionist? Like, at what point in you actually creating something are you just all of a sudden assuming the dawn and mantle of just like, I am a perfectionist. Everything I have to do has to look perfect. Everything that I do must be magnificent. It has to be at the highest level. It has to be at the highest caliber. And I'm gonna tell you, it's not at the part that you enjoy. It's not at the part where you feel the most fulfilled. It's not at the part at all where you're actually going to feel like you're making great progress. No, friend. It's the complete opposite of that, isn't it? It's when you meet difficulty. It's when you start to get into that part of your process, and let me know what it is for you down below, because I think everybody's got a different version of this. But once you start to hit that ugly phase, and you know what phase I'm talking about, don't you? It's a phase where you felt really good about it, and then, oh, this doesn't look so good anymore. Oh, I don't know about that. Ooh, that face looks jacked up, or like, what's up with those hands? You know what I'm talking about? Am I talking about you? But there's actually something worse I'm gonna talk to you about later today. And every single time that you hit that bar and you run into that kind of wall of failure, and something doesn't look right, something doesn't look to your standards, something doesn't look to your imagination, right? That is not a bad thing, okay? And then that exposes this as well. You have an issue with failure, my friend. You have an issue with confronting challenge. And this is one of the things that I learned for myself too, because every single time that I would hit those ugly phases, and listen, I still hit those ugly phases. That never goes away, friend. If you're just like, man, I'm just gonna work myself until this doesn't happen anymore. I'm gonna have a better idea. I'm gonna have a better project, and it'll never happen again. That's complete nonsense, and it will always happen. You'll always hit those ugly phases. But what I learned, and what I would like for you to potentially adopt the philosophy of, is this as well, is that failure is part of the recipe for success. It's an ingredient in it, okay? Most of us are trying to run away from failure. Most of us are trying to run away from challenge. Most of us are just trying to stay in our comfort zones and only do to the point of the process, in which case we really like it, and then boom, we dump out of it, and then we start to exhibit perfectionist qualities, like I'll kind of warn you about and talk to you about today. Then we just shut down. And then we start to go through it, and then inevitably what happens? Then you stop, right? And listen, once you start to recognize that is the truth of it, then you can actually utilize perfectionism in order to propel you forward, in order to be a tool in your tool belt, in order to be a superpower for you as well. How would that sound for you? Because I'm just gonna go on a limb here and say, it probably sucks right now, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to. Now, with my interactions with thousands of artists just like you, I've encountered this really common phenomena, and I wonder if this might be it for you too. You see, for people like me that are professional artists in their day job, and then you get out of your day job, and then you get home, and then do you ever feel like you just don't have the same approach? And tell me, this can be anything. This can just be, for you as a contract artist, for you that's just taking commissions. Do you ever feel like you don't have these perfectionism issues when you're doing your professional work? Are you actually able to tell yourself and disassociate from that and be like, okay, well, this is just for the work, it's just for the gig, it's just for the job, so on and so forth. But then when it comes time for you to actually sit down and plug yourself into like what you actually, want to do, something that you were excited about, all of a sudden, like everything starts to crumble. And I used to have this problem too. too, where like I'd have my own characters I wanted to make, and I would come home from work and I'd just be like, I got nothing. Like, this is just so overwhelming and stressful. Have you felt this way too? And whether or not you struggle with one or the other of those, here's what I want to urge you to understand is that if you're capable of learning how to disassociate yourself from perfectionism type of habits in one aspect, you're capable of doing it in another. The issue here, though, especially I see with personal work, is that it's a matter of care. See, when you are actually working on something personally relevant for you, personally meaningful for you right here, that you designed, that nobody told you to do, right? You care significantly more about it. Makes sense. It's actually quite nice, isn't it? However, though, you care to such an extent that you think to yourself things like, I have to make it great. I have to make it wonderful. I have to make it the best. And this creates an enormous amount of stress onto you. And as I go through practical strategies with this, it's got to start with this. You have to learn in your artwork specifically what to actually care about. You have to actually identify certain targets, because if y'all want to know the number one worst mindset to have approaching any artwork, personally or professionally, it's this. Don't ever approach your artwork thinking, this has to be amazing. This has to be the best. This has to be the greatest. This has to be portfolio ready. If you approach it like that, first off, that's an unspecific target, because inevitably, if you're expecting it to be the most wonderful thing you've ever done, and on the other end of that, you're also afraid that it's not going to be the most wonderful thing you've ever done, guess what? You're going to lean more into the fear than into the hope of it, simply because you don't have specific targets. So here are 3 things that I would make sure that you identify in every artwork that you do. Number 1, what's the focus of it? What do you want me to look at first? Number 2, what's the mood of this piece? How do you want me to feel emotionally when I look at this? And then number 3, what's the learning outcome that you want to achieve from it? You have something new to learn in every single artwork that you do. If you simply identify those 3 things, your perfectionism won't come in as hard, because you actually have something concrete, some type of actual measurable outcome to achieve, rather than it has to look good, which it probably won't to your standard, because you are approaching it with an unhealthy mindset. You see how that works? And as you're switching from a personal to professional, I want to urge you to do this. What if you adopted those same philosophies from your professional work into your personal work? Because if you're capable of doing it in one place, you're capable of transferring it to another. How's that sound? Now, let me tell you my number 1 powerhouse tip for how I fight perfectionism, but more importantly though, I actually don't fight it, I work with it. And here's how I do this. And when you assume that you are a perfectionist, right? You are probably working very slow in very concentrated areas. Am I talking about you? Are you working at like an hour and a half of just kind of rendering out that nose, or like 45 minutes with a single wisp of hair, or you're working on a single finger for like 3 hours? What I want you to reconsider your perfectionism as, in how you're rendering and how you're approaching your artwork and where you're focusing your energy and your efforts, simply like this. I want you to think of perfectionism as a switch, not like a destructive monkey that's just running around your brain with a wrench and screwing up everything, okay? And what we also need to really identify at the core of what perfectionism is, y'all, it's procrastination from doing the things that you don't want to do. It's procrastination from you wanting to avoid the things that are difficult and in favor of you doing tasks that you feel comfortable with. And the issue that this becomes and that arises from this is that you're just not using your time efficiently. So what I want to urge you instead is to reconsider this. Practice a non-committal attitude for the majority of your project. And I want you to use perfectionism as a switch that you turn on for the last 20% of it. So this has been something game-changing for me. And as I've been developing my skills and developing my practices, developing my process, it's gonna be a little bit different for you too, but it'll generally look like this. I'm gonna practice a non-committal attitude as I'm gonna be going through this drawing process. So even as you're watching me paint right now, okay, here's generally what my process looks like, is that I'm gonna do my lines, and then I'm gonna go ahead and do basic colors over the entire piece. Then I'm gonna do a soft indication of lighting all over the entire piece, and it typically looks pretty graphic nowadays. And then I'm gonna come back to it, and I'm gonna do a little bit of a render on everything. I'm gonna start that on everything. Then I'm gonna do a little bit of a texture pass on everything. And then I'm gonna turn on my perfectionism and say, okay, Sean, ready to go. It's like a caged beast. And I'm ready to actually come in, now that I have everything, like 70, 80% done, then I'm gonna come in and actually make everything look exactly what it needs to look like. And from doing this, you are going to feel much better, because the problem with perfectionism, if you haven't realized it yet, is that you just let it out too early. You're just unleashing it upon your artwork when it's not prepared for it. It's almost like if somebody came around and graded a test you were taking in the middle of you taking it instead of at the end of it. You see where I'm going with this? And there are other forces at play here too that I want to alert you to, because it's not that simple. And if you want to adopt a philosophy where you actually feel good about your artwork while you're in process, then think about the things as we're going through this video as far as how they're going to affect you, because all of this is holistically impacting you right now, whether you realize it or not. Now, another issue that you might encounter while you're trying to be a better artist is that you forgot to hit that like and subscribe button. Come on, y'all. I'm giving you weekly advice just like this. Practical, actual advice that nobody else on YouTube is. And if you want to come along for that ride, make sure that you ride with me too. And hey, if this is helpful for you, make sure that you share it with somebody that you know. And then also make sure you're aware of this one. Now, I want to approach a really heavy topic that you've never heard, but this is a major invasive issue I've seen with everybody that suffers from perfectionism, and this was my case too, okay? Most of our entire lives, I want to just let you know that you are really not trained on how to care for yourself and care for your artwork, or just generally just care for the things that you want to care about. And this invades your artwork, and this is kind of the genesis for where perfectionism lies, is that you just don't feel comfortable doing things that you actually like, that you actually enjoy. And when you get the opportunity to, it feels really foreign. I'm gonna explain it to you like this, because most of your life, in case you didn't know this, you're trained into absolute servitude. And just look back at your life and tell me if this sounds like you. First off, when you're born, you're in servitude to your parents. Then you're in servitude to your teachers. Then you're in servitude to your employer. And then if you have a family, you're in servitude to that part too. So there's 4 really big forces at which point you are a servant to them. And then when it comes time for you, especially in your adulthood, as those start to compound on top of each other, you start to lose yourself, and you just feel like you're putting all of this care and all of this effort and all of this focus into those things. And then when you actually sit down to actually create something for yourself, are you like, I just don't feel like I have much in the tank? Or you also, as perfectionism presents itself, is actually you have a hyper fixation. You're like, oh, I finally get time for myself. I actually care about this. I actually want to do this. And then you self-sabotage yourself. And why is that? Because you've been trained into a life of servitude. And the thing that I want to help you reconsider is just this. You actually going through this process like I'm explaining today, and you understanding how to combat your perfectionism is actually a means for you to learn to care about yourself and invest into yourself. And if you are adopting these habits that perfectionists tend to have, like myself, like a lot of people that I know that are self-proclaimed perfectionists, you're actually combating your way of taking care of yourself and investing into the things that you want. It's just self-sabotage. You're just trying to self-implode and fight against it because your conditioned nature is to not do anything for yourself. Have you ever considered that? So to have a way to practically get around this, I've really learned that I have to, as a means of developing myself, as a means of combating this attitude of servitude, I need to make sure that I'm making time, I'm scheduling time, and at the end of every single project, even if it isn't the most glorious thing, I learned something and I did something for myself. Because a lot of what society will teach you to do is to be a contributor for somebody else. But I just want to let you know, society's not going to care about you when you die, okay? Literally in like 3 generations, nobody will even know your name. So why would you work harder for something and somebody and some people that don't care about you when really the only person that cares about you is you? You ever thought about that? Now, I want to let you know that there is a really big, dark, ominous force that's present amongst all perfectionism. And it typically starts with what you're doing once you encounter your perfectionism. Now, listen, you might be somebody who's a hard perfectionist, and like you are somebody who's just toils and slaves away over the same thing for the same amount of time. And then inevitably, what happens? Then your tank empties creatively and energetically speaking, and then you stop. Then you drop the project. Are you one of these people that has like just a graveyard of unfinished projects? Do you never finish anything either because it doesn't meet your standard? It's not up to your level. It doesn't hit your expectations, right? The reason why you do that and then what you do afterwards is so common isn't because you're lazy. It isn't because you're incapable. It isn't because you're not talented. It isn't because your mom and dad were right about your artistic future, right? Here's what it actually is. It's this force that's called resistance. And Stephen Pressfield wrote about this in his book, The War for Art. And basically, resistance is the #1 inhibiting factor to why you are a perfectionist. So what does it look like when you're a perfectionist? Well, typically, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna work on small areas at a time. And then you're gonna laboriously go through certain things at a certain pace. But here's what I want you to call into question. Why are you doing that? And this generally comes down to your process. And you wanna just take a look at like, okay, should I be doing this? What is the focus of this right now? Like, what should I be done? How can I make more progress? What could I do? And what I see that perfectionists tend to do way too often and way too comfortably, mind you too, is that you tend to just take an absurd amount of time on the same things for a long period of time. So a way that I found to combat this is real simple. Just give yourself a limit for how long you're allowing yourself to work on an area. So like, for example, you might be like, okay, this face, I'm gonna work on this face for 30 minutes. Then I'm gonna move on over here. Then I'm gonna move on over here. Then I'm gonna move on over here. If you catch yourself and you start to become more cognizant over what you're doing and how long you're doing it, switch tasks. One of the worst things that I see all the time too is that people will just beat a dead horse. They're like, I don't like this. This doesn't look right. That hand doesn't look right. And then it still doesn't look right. And then the next day it doesn't look right. And then a week later it still doesn't look right. Why are you doing that? It is such a waste of your time and energy to just beat that into hamburger instead of you just saying, okay, look, let me just take a break from that. I'm gonna come back over here, okay? Now I did that. I'm not really sure how that's gonna look. Okay, let me just take a pause from that, and I'll come on over here. And look, what this does is it prevents you from feeling resistance to your artwork. Because the worst thing, and tell me if you've ever felt this, if you ever felt like, man, I wanna work on my artwork, no, I don't. Actually, this is really hard. And then you start to do self-sabotaging techniques where you don't want to work on art, where you're avoiding art, where you're just indulging in media consumption, where you're doing things that you actually don't care about, but you're pretending to because they give you quick dopamine hits. Are you struggling with this? Because one of the best things I learned is that if I'm struggling or frustrated with one area, I've got loads of other areas that I can work on too. And then I can just come back to that. Or maybe I need to look up a new reference. Maybe I need to look up a new resource. But one of the worst things I'm gonna warn you about soon in this video is why you stepping away from it is actually gonna be the worst decision for you, especially as a perfectionist. And that's all because of this force of resistance. Have you ever encountered that? Now, as you're gonna be feeling dejected and you're gonna be feeling like it's not good enough, everything that you make isn't quite to your level, or you're looking at like, okay, well, this part of the artwork is amazing, this part sucks. And then you start to lose your drive for actually finishing the piece. And then you want to start to quit, right? And this is what perfectionism generally looks like as a cycle. You generally are really high in the beginning on your energy, and then you hit a really big low at some point. And I generally noticed in my artwork a lot that I had like a lot of inequalities. In other words, certain areas were really well developed and other areas weren't. And I would like certain aspects and I would really hate certain aspects. And I see this a lot in my client-based work. Like if you didn't know this, I feel intense anxiety every single time that I start a project, and I feel intense anxiety, like especially towards the middle of a project, and I'll talk to you about why that happens later on. And one thing that's really shaped my overall approach to my art making, and you might want to consider this too, every single time that I'm making some level of effort, it's actually helping you, even if it doesn't look perfect. You are not failing and starting from nothing every single time that you pick up that artwork. No, right? You're actually starting from experience. And that's one of the key things that I had a really rough time learning, was that even if that face looked busted, even if the hands were jacked up, even if the proportions just didn't make sense, that gave me a starting point, and that gave me something I could then improve upon. And one of the things that I also do too, and you might want to start with this too, is that you can definitely start to revisit some of your older pieces every like 6 to 12 months. And that's one of the processes that I really enjoy myself too. And what that gives me with is the ability to look back at the things that I've done and consider where I can go from it. And even if what you do isn't the best version of it, You don't start from nothing, you start with experience. And starting from experience enables you to proceed forward with wisdom, because the more you create, the wiser that you get. Have you ever considered that? Or are you not being gentle enough on yourself and you're thinking that every single time that something doesn't hit perfectly the first time, that's why you're not worth it, and that's why you're convincing yourself that art's not for you? Is this you? Now, as you're going through this cycle, and while you're adopting and you're exhibiting your perfectionist tendencies, okay, this produces an extreme emotional roller coaster, doesn't it? You're like, yay, no, woohoo, oh God, no. And you are exhibiting these extreme high lows that you just can't control, right? And I used to have this issue too, where I would be extremely elated and then I would hate it and I would never want to see it again. And then compounding all that, then you're gonna start to, because you don't like what you're doing, then your perfectionism and your procrastination is going to tell you that you're tired, that you should be doing something else, that you should be putting it off. And then you're thinking that, well, this isn't good for my mental health. Then you're gonna tell yourself that, well, I need to think about my feelings and I need to really sort this thing out. And my friend, I really wanna let you know this, and I'm telling you this from the bottom of my heart because it's something that I had to learn the hard way, and I think that more artists should really heavily consider, just like you, is this: screw your feelings and screw your energy. These are the two biggest liars that are never going to help you in your art or in your life. And here's what I mean by that. At no point when I say screw your feelings and how you feel, are you ever going to be plagued with this like extreme euphoria. Like at no point are you just like, well, sure, I can't work on this art because I'm just so happy. Everything's so great. Everything's unicorns, puppies, and rainbows. Everything's awesome. No, you're like, I'm too sad. I'm too anxious. I'm too fraught with peril over how this artwork is. And I'm just doubting myself the entire time, okay? Look, your negative feelings are not meant to help you, friend. They're actually just there and exist strictly because they perceive your artwork and what you're doing at that time as a threat. Which, is it a threat? No. Are you gonna die from your artwork? Man, I sure hope not. But look, I've never had a paintbrush attack me either. So look, if you're feeling that way, that's also emotional resistance. Your emotions come up just to keep you comfortable in that comfort zone where you don't actually grow. But listen, where the real work starts in art is once it starts to get hard, not when it's easy, not when it starts, and definitely not at the concept level either. That's the simple part. And then two, you're gonna be talking about your energy. You're gonna be like, oh, I don't have the energy, I don't have the motivation, I'm too sleepy, I'm too tired for this. And look, most of the time, you're actually A-okay fine. But the thought of that and that physical resistance towards it is actually the culprit of your energy. So the way that you can very easily get around this, and I promise you, if you try this, it's gonna blow away all of your reservations, all of your lack of energy, because it's worked for me and hundreds of people just like you too. It's called the 30-minute rule. The next time that you're feeling like you just have no energy, there's no way that you could possibly create right now, just sit down for 30 minutes, and at the end of 30 minutes, sure, go ahead, walk away. But I promise you this, because this is typically how it goes for everybody that I've ever had try this, is that you typically are blazing ahead longer than 30 minutes, like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. This has been my practice with it and other people. And most of the time, why this is so effective is because the initial resistance of starting that work, of actually putting in more time into it, that's the real reason that you feel that way. And your body and your mind are kind of rebelling against you. So you have to fight back against it. And this is one of the best strategies I've ever developed and had people seen massive success with it too. And I know it'll work for you too. Try it out. Now look, one of the most important things that you have to do and you have to see, and if you really are struggling with perfectionism and you're just lost in this cage where you just feel trapped and you want to stop this, you want to grow, you want to be a better artist, right? We need to examine, why do you feel that way? And you might think that it's just a skill issue, you might think it's a confidence issue, and both of those are partial truths. And here's what it really is. You just don't trust yourself. And most people think that confidence is just born, it's just innate, like, oh, they're just built different, but no, friend. At the core of what allows you to move forward and to embolden your process or to try new things or to do things better or differently, you need to make efforts that are going to combat this. And here's what it basically looks like. A lot of times when I talk to artists, they have so much energy, enthusiasm, and so much happiness over the thought of something. And I just want to let you know this, thoughts are worthless. Your ideas are worthless. What actually makes you a standout artist isn't your idea, friend. I think a lot of people have deluded us into thinking this, but it's not the truth, y'all. It is your labor. And one of the things that you are going to do, the more that you continue to labor towards being an artist, is you have to learn how you doing little tasks and little actions builds trust, appreciation, and love for yourself. And the biggest influence for this is definitely your process. So like for me personally, at the beginning of every single project I do, man, I feel massive stress and anxiety. I feel avoidance. I feel intense resistance towards it. And I feel like everything I do is just not good enough. And what I'm a big fan of too is just doing micro bursts of productivity. So like one day I might just look up references, and then the next day I might organize that and go ahead and get some more based on some other things. I might explore some ideas on it too. And then I'll start a really disgustingly rough sketch. And then from there, I'll kind of do a slightly 50% more refined sketch. And then from there, I'll do a more refined sketch. And then from there, I'll actually make it look finished and polished. And then from there, I'll rock into the rest of my process. And what I want to urge you on is to consider this. Everything that you do, every single minor and major task is building trust in yourself that you can do this, that you can make efforts for it. And that big time also is important for finishing your work. Are you somebody that never does that because of your perfectionism? When you finish something, when you accomplish something, when you actually make efforts and you work for something, especially in your artwork, you're proving to yourself, I can do this, I can do that. That's at the core of confidence. That's at the core of how you're going to get better. Conversely though, every single time that you don't do it, that you delude yourself into thinking that somehow thinking about your artwork is going to make you a better artist, every single time that you don't follow through, you're actually proving that you don't have trust in yourself and that you don't do it. See, you're actually conditioning yourself to either win or fail. And you got to combat that with just simple daily tasks, however major or minor. Try it out. All right, now let's tackle the biggest, ugliest elephant in the room, and I'm talking about art block. But what if I told you art block wasn't real? Here's the proof. All right, so here's what it typically presents itself as. You typically sit down and you try something and it doesn't work out. Or you've got this really great idea, but you just feel arrested, like you absolutely cannot go for it, right? Or maybe you tried something and after a little bit, you just dump out and feel like it's just not working. You're just completely blocked by something, right? Well, here's what art block actually does to you. And there's two really negative consequences to believing in this effect. Paramount to this discussion today, you have to just see it for what it is, but it's not real. And here's what I really mean by this. Like at no point in all my years of being an artist, nor talking to other artists, have I ever heard somebody tell me like, well, Sean, I just sat down to draw it and I really wanted to get after it. And then wouldn't you know it, my tablet just got up and slapped the crap out of me. Nor have I ever heard anybody say, well, here I was going along, I was drawing, and then all of a sudden my paintbrush just stabbed me in the eye and now I gotta wear this eye patch afterwards. But what I want you to understand while I'm being a bit playful with this is to help you realize that this is not an actual phenomenon. It is a perceived event. And unfortunately for artists, this is the most persistent lie that creatives have been told in human history, is that somehow there is this invisible force that's just gonna come over you, envelop you in it, and make you completely unable to be creative. But I'm gonna prove to you in this video why that's actually not the case. And because of that, you need to realize this, is that art block only gives it as much power as you allow it to have over you. The effects of it will only be to the magnitude of which that you allow it to assume control of you. And now, I'm not telling you that what you're feeling isn't real. I'm not telling you that what you actually are wrestling with isn't an actual event, because there is. And listen, by the end of this video, I guarantee you that you are going to be way more enlightened as to what that is and how to tackle it. And that's what I want to really gift you with before you leave this today. Because I guarantee you there's something way beneath the surface that you've never even considered that's actually causing your block. Now, the second effect is going to be something that is particularly nasty and I think often overlooked by most creatives. And I just want to ask you how your belief in any type of force that is completely outside of your control is ever going to help you succeed. And that rolls us into the second biggest issue with the belief in art block as a concept, as a true phenomenon, as an actual event, is that it just reinforces victim mentality. And that's what I want to warn you about, is that you succumbing to this idea of art block will never help you. And you as a creative, you've got great ideas. You have big dreams. You have amazing things that you want to do and make and accomplish, don't you? How is this ever going to help you succeed? And I get it when you get in those zones, you get in those moments where you don't feel like you're creative. And that's when you start to go to that place where you start to believe that there is actually this thing called art block that just siphons your creativity away, right? But hold up, pause on that, because that then entails that you believe that there's actually something that exists out there that can actually turn off your creativity. But here's what I want to let you know, friend, through my extensive years of research on this, is that there's actually no way that you can do that, because creativity is a default mode. Like, we are ingrained born to be creatives, but what happens is that when we become adults, that belief gets beaten out of us, that joy gets taken out of us, and you need to come to understand what are those thieves of that joy that led you to believe that creativity is like a switch that can be turned on and off, rather than it's just something that's always running in the background. And while you're labeling it as an art block, here's what I'm going to propose to you so that you actually understand what's going on right now, is that you don't have an art block. You don't have a creativity block. You have a life block. And why is it easier to just blame your creativity and have your art become collateral damage for what is actually happening in your life right now? And why is that so acceptable? Well, look, I want to tell you this with love as somebody that's helped thousands of artists just like you. And here's the honest truth. It's way easier to just be a victim of some exterior force and circumstance than it is for you to sit and be uncomfortable and to do a deep dive into what is really bothering you. And we're actually trained out of how to do this nowadays. So do you want to know what this actual life block is? Because here's everything that could be for you. Now here's a fun one that I'm sure you're all going to relate to. And I just want to ask you this, like, do you hate your job? Do you feel like you are just constantly performing menial tasks? Do you feel like you're just a drone that's just buzzing around all day? Do you find your mind just wandering all the time and you're wishing you were doing other things, and you're especially caught in the cycle where you're just constantly thinking about what you wish you were doing instead, and that, no, I'd rather not be doing this, but I would rather be doing art? But then here's the ironic part, is that when the time comes for you to make art, all of a sudden you've got no energy and you've been blocked from it. Is this you? So your failure to launch artistically comes, and why does that happen? And I want to let you know that you're actually just fighting a secret war that's masking itself as a creative block. And your true enemy here is that you are instead not battling creativity, friend, but you're battling desire. And I want to let you know why your desire to want to do better things or do things that you feel are more important than what you're currently doing right now is actually killing your creativity. Because first off, you're expending all of this energy, an intense amount of energy, into fighting what's happening right now. And you're like, I don't want to be doing this. This is stupid. I'd rather be doing this. I want to be doing this instead. I want to quit this job. I hate this job. I'd rather be making art. I'd rather be making my comic. I'd rather be working for a company. I'd rather be working for clients, okay? Here's the thing, is that you're taking an insane amount of mental and emotional resources into battling that, rather than reserving that for when you actually need it later. If you think of this like a car, you wake up in the morning and you've got a full tank, and then by the end of the day, you've been fighting desire so much that you're practically on E and running on fumes by the time that you get back, and it's actually time for you to sit down and be creative. This can not just only be at work though too, this can also be for, I don't know, are you a parent? Because I'm just gonna be real honest with you, there's a lot of times where it's like I'm dealing with some kid having a tantrum in my house, and like, I'd rather be doing this, or I'd rather be making that. And that's okay, like there's nothing to feel guilty about. That's just something that we naturally experience as a human. But you're probably wondering now, like, what is my fix for this? And how do I get through this? First off, I just want you to consider this is like, what can you do with what you're currently doing to make it a little bit more bearable and something that you're not gonna wholly hate and therefore fight against? Like, just for example, let's go back to my parenting example. Let's say that your kids are just totally freaking out and you need to go ahead and you obviously need to take care of that situation, but then what do you do afterwards? Maybe you can get them involved in some creative efforts. Maybe you can get them involved in some artwork. I've done this with my kids, like we'll sit down and we'll follow along like a YouTube art video after a character that they like to watch from their favorite show. If you're at work, hey, can you personalize your space? Or have you ever noticed, especially those of you that have like an office, you have a cubicle, a desk or something, how many people that have been there for a long time, they personalize their entire space? Why is that? Because when you feel you have ownership of it, you feel less resistance to sitting down and working there and performing there. And let me just ask you this too, what can you start to do to prepare yourself for art when you have those moments of rest, when you have those moments where there's absolutely nothing to do? Can you look up references? Can you look at inspirational pictures? Can you start to prepare for the project that you actually want to do rather than fight against the fact that you're not doing it right now? Because the last thing I want you to do is to get home and realize that you're just running on fumes and your art future dies on the road with it. The next phantom cause of art block has to deal with this, and I want you to be real honest with yourself here. What are you doing instead of doing art? Because I guarantee you, you are not just sitting on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, doing absolutely nothing for hours. You're doing something else, aren't you? And that brings in the real culprit of your creativity, and it is this force that is ever present in what we do, but especially for creatives, and it is called resistance. It really comes to light in this book called The War for Art from Steven Pressfield, which I'm just gonna recommend is a must read for all creatives because he details all of the different resistances that artists experience, and it definitely influenced a lot of this video you're watching today. So on this topic, I want to ask you, when you start to sit down and you start to say to yourself, either out loud or interiorly, I can't create, I just don't feel it, I have no ideas. Okay, pause, stop. You say that, and then you do what? What are you running to instead? Because when you really sit down and you see what that is, what are you going to? Are you going to play video games? Are you going doom scrolling? Are you watching funny videos? Are you immediately running to do something else that's going to give you an instant boost? Well, then that's the real problem right there, is that your distractions are actually the biggest issue that you're feeling right now. All of those, that's just you battling those compulsions for fun and instant gratification over your creative efforts. So here's just the base question you want to ask yourself every single time that you go away from art and you start to feel art blocked is this: are you chasing happiness, which is a fleeting momentary feeling, or are you going to instead chase fulfillment, which has a longevity component, it has a long draw component to it? And just to give you a personal example for this, like there have been a lot of times where as I'm going through and I'm building my art business and I'm working with clients, and I realize that like there are certain things that I feel compelled to, like I feel compelled to play video games like all the time, and I love it, and I can literally sit down for like days and do it. However though, I also just came off of a big bout where I was doing a lot of things, I was focusing on a lot of projects, and I totally gave up playing video games for 4 months just to do it because it mattered to me more. And then when life opened up and I had a little bit more time, I could play for a little bit here or there. So what I'm gonna urge you to do is, instead of you just running to that knee-jerk reaction, is to identify that crutch activity. And then the next time that maybe you get yourself up and you go to do it, just pause and be like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Why do I feel compelled to do this right now? And ask yourself this: is this going to bring me closer to where I want to go or further away from where I'm supposed to be? The next reason you might be struggling is that you haven't hit that like and subscribe button, because I'm here to deliver content like this to you every single week designed to help you grow yourself, grow your art, and grow your art business. If you're on board with that, please make sure that you do that. And hey, if this is helping you, please share with someone that you know and love. And then also watch out for this. All right, so here comes the first one, and let me start you off with this. Every single time that you start to create art, or when you start to create art, you immediately fall into thoughts of inadequacy, avoidance, maybe a little bit of anxiety about it. And I just want to push you to ask yourself this: where are your thoughts trailing to? Where are they going? So the reality of when you're feeling this way and when you feel like you can't perform creatively, what you're actually experiencing is you have your creativity time invaded by some type of life circumstance. Because oftentimes, way too often, I find that we are instead blaming our art instead of really closely examining our social emotional states. So what could this be? It could have been you had an argument with a loved one or a friend. It could be that you had a bad day at work. You could maybe be in a perpetually bad relationship. Or maybe you're just in a poor environment right now that doesn't help foster your creative efforts. The big issue that this creates though, is that when you're not actually looking at, oh, is this circumstance making me stop right now because my mind is on this and not on my art is that you start to form an adversarial bond with your artwork. And this will definitely not serve you, my friend. My advice for you, y'all, is that if you're feeling like you absolutely cannot handle any type of creative effort, you have to address the root problem. And that's not gonna be easy all the time too, and it's definitely not gonna be fast. It's not gonna have a quick resolution all the time, okay? But you can't shy away from maybe having hard conversations with people, or you really examining what you're doing to help perpetuate that circumstance as well. And overall, just tackling what that real circumstance is that is actually negating your ability to perform at the highest, most effective artistic level. And my ultimate advice for you on this one is that if you're going through rough circumstance, I have nothing but love and empathy for you, my friend, because we all have to experience that negative component of the human condition. But as it's been for me in my life, I want you just to consider instead, what if art was your freedom? What if it's your liberation from that? What if it's your catharsis and your therapy for it too? Because what I propose for you is to take back that personal power, to take back the freedom that you used to gain from it. Because right now, that power has been stolen, misplaced, and then given to something that is way outside of art. Because if you don't regain that power that's been lost, stolen, or misplaced into a circumstance, then you risk losing to them and losing your art too. Next, I want to let you know why you're currently caught up in a web, and you're stuck alongside your art and every other joyful idea that you have. Now, considering that the whole purpose for you sitting down is that you actually do enjoy it and it brings you joy, or you feel like right now it's not, or at least in this very moment, it doesn't. Your mind starts to wander, your mind starts to go into some dark places. I want to let you know that instead of you experiencing a art block, what you're actually experiencing is a spiral into negative thought patterns. This is commonly experienced by artists, especially those prone to sensitivities and bouts of low emotional states. And listen, I've been there too. I've been in those dark places and I've pulled myself out of it. And I know that you're going to be able to do that too. But the hard thing is for you to go from this place where you're at a really low state into a really high productive state. And this is when every single fear, every single doubt comes into play, because what you're actually feeling is despair. And it's actually when you're starting to really doubt yourself. It's when the imposter syndrome kicks in. And it's when you start to have every single thought erupt while you're starting to create art or when you're about to create art. And it just arrests you completely. And listen, when you're posing art, all that creativity that you have that maybe comes naturally to you every single moment that you're not doing it, it just seems siphoned from you, doesn't it? But then think about this though. How is you giving into those thoughts ever going to bring you to a better place? Because staying in your poor mental health condition right now will never help you, will never help you succeed, and will only perpetuate that cycle. And so now you're naturally like, well, what do I do? Well, listen, I'm definitely gonna tell you what not to do later. That's coming soon. But look, if this is chronic for you, I definitely recommend that first off, you need to maybe look into some professional resources, you need to get into some help programs, and that's all great too. But what you can start to do outside of all that is listen, just start to examine what is the emotional trigger that you're feeling and why is it making you feel that way. And here's the most important piece of advice I can give you if you're caught into this right now is that just ask yourself, what do I need to do right now to elevate my state? What do I need to do right now that's going to produce a burst for me that's going to bring it back to me, okay? And I'm speaking about this in a way that's not going to, again, distract you. Don't sit down and play video games for 4 hours and say that it helped your emotional state, because it won't. It just helps you run away from it further. Instead, really think about what that's going to be, and I've got some suggestions for you coming soon. And at the core of this, we just have to understand this, that if you abandon your art for your emotional state, you lose twice and you suffer twice. Do you really want that? Now, you never want to be plagued by art block again, because listen up. And I want to let you know that the worst beast that you'll ever battle for creativity is the one that you raise yourself, and here's what it is. And to give you an example of this, y'all, do you ever play video games that have branching decisions? Like I'm talking about, like if you've ever played like Mass Effect or any of those types of games where every single moment that you have a conversation with somebody, you've got like 4 different options. What if you could know everything that's going to happen and everything that you're going to do and what that's going to lead to? That's what we love about those games. And what if you could do that in life too? Because oftentimes, what I tend to notice a lot of artists do is that we are really fantastic at making momentary decisions. And what I generally tend to steer people towards is this thought process here when they're struggling with this is what you're doing right now. Is this building positive momentum or is it building negative momentum? And here's what I want to ask you. The next time that you sit down and you're just like, I can't, okay, ask yourself this. Is this a 4-minute decision where in the next 4 minutes, I'm gonna get some instant gratification, doing something else, going someplace else, engage in some other activity? Or is this a decision where, how about in 4 years, how am I going to feel? Because if you do it right now, I guarantee you in 4 years, you're gonna keep doing it. What is your life going to be like if you continue to build this habit where you just give up every single time that you don't feel it right then, and you just continue that? Well, in 40 years, you're gonna be feeling the exact same way that you currently do right now, because what you're currently arrested by is the effect of negative inertia. So what I wanna warn you about is that right now, you are currently seduced by right now, because right now you might not be feeling it. Right now, you feel like it's just not coming easily to you. And then right now, you are feeling like there's something else that you should be doing right now, right? And that's what starts negative inertia. And when we talk about inertia, what I'm specifically stating is the momentum you gain from one task that begins to also transfer into another task. In a similar way, when you don't do a task, it builds another excuse for you not to start another task, and then builds another excuse not to start the next task, so on and so forth. And just to serve you up a real big honesty pill right now, you know what you should be doing. Like, it's not hard to sit down and figure out, like, look, this is everything I need to do to go in the direction I want to and to be successful with my art. But the issue is that you're not doing it. Not because you're incapable, not because you're inept, it's because you're not actively moving towards it. And your lack of doing is actually your lack of becoming. Have you ever considered that? So to combat this, what I generally like to recommend people do is to engage in task vomit. It's a wonderful term, isn't it? But basically, here's what you want to do, is you want to take a look at what you want to do, whatever that plan is, okay? And just literally write down like every single task associated with it, every single minor, minuscule task. And then that becomes sort of a checklist for you. And you can do it in any order you want, okay? But the biggest thing is for you to chunk down everything that you're doing. Because just to be honest with you, our brains cannot handle unspecific and extremely long-term and undefined goals. And if you want to build yourself into the person, I want you to consider this. Because Miyamoto Musashi once said that you have to kill your current self in order to build the self that you want to have. And I don't mean that in an extreme way, but let's just be honest. We've all got parts of us that are just not helping us, that are toxic, and that we need to dump because there's only so much room in that vessel of a body you've got, right? So let me ask you this, like, what habits and actions are currently destroying your potential? Now, I'm gonna concede in this video that there is one block that is actually real, and there is one force that is actually tangible, preventing you from actually taking any action. And this effect, this force over your future, is often wholly disregarded, is often overlooked, and in times it's even weirdly glorified for artists. What I'm talking about is poor physical health. Is this you, by the way? And look, this is easily mislabeled as creative block, but you're literally blocked by your biology. There's something going on internally inside of you that is preventing you from taking action as you normally should. I recently did a video on when you think you're too tired to create art, and people did bring this one up, and I didn't get a chance to address it then, so I definitely want to address it now and give it a lot of legitimacy. But listen, it's also not something that's going to totally destroy your future either, because it is a manageable circumstance. Because all of these, they are to be monitored and maintained. Like when you have an illness, if you have a chronic disease, if you have a perpetual ailment for you, there's nothing you can do that is necessarily going to cure something that's just going to be a part of your life, is going to be a part of your biology. I concede to that 100%. But here's what I want to urge you to consider though, is that if you have that, how do you work with it rather than against it? And I want to urge you to consider that because remember that resistance is the killer of your creativity, not a block. For those of us that don't suffer from chronic issues and chronic illnesses and all that, here are some really simple things that you might want to consider. Do you have really consistently poor sleeping habits? Do you have a terrible crap diet where you're just eating junk food all the time? Do you have a nutrient deficiency too? Are you eating food that's like always takeout, always fast food? You get it from the convenience store all the time because your body is literally dying inside from you not getting what it needs in order to produce energy. Also, here's a really big thing, but like lack of water. So many people don't drink water nowadays, and it's literally 75% of your entire body's composition. And if you're not feeding it right there, you're dehydrated, and the effects of dehydration are, guess what? Lethargy, and that's what's also killing your creativity. Along with that too, do you maybe never step outside? Are you never exercising? There's loads of things that you can do that can fix this. And I want to focus you into meeting your needs. Like, do you have a vitamin deficiency? How about investing into some supplements? How about you get a blood lab and see what exactly you're missing from that? Do you need exercise? Can you go ahead and look on YouTube? Like, you can literally find 15-minute workouts that will literally get you sweating and your heart racing on there. Do you need more water? Get one of those big jugs that tell you exactly what time of the day that you're supposed to be intaking it by. Drop the junk food. Go outside every once in a while. It's a great, beautiful world out there. Because y'all, you gotta take care of your vessel before it breaks and cannot hold your creativity any longer. Now, riding the coattails of the last real art block, this one is also definitely not an imaginary one. And I'm gonna take this one with the most utmost severity and sincerity in explaining this one to you. And I wanna ask you this: how are you supposed to operate at peak performance in your creative efforts if you are feeling threatened right now? And what I'm talking about here are when you have ever-present, sustained mortal threats. So for example, if you live in a horribly unsafe environment, if you're experiencing homelessness, long-term or short-term, if you have a lack of food, if you're in an unsafe relationship, or if your caretaker is somebody that is wholly neglecting you too. These are all threats to your humanity. And it's very difficult to perform at peak levels that you want to be at naturally, right? When your mortality is perhaps at risk. And this can even be something that isn't long-term, but short-term too. Like, just as an example, in the area I live in the United States, there was recently a hurricane and it dumped 20 inches of water on my area, and people have been evacuated, put into shelters, put into hotels. The National Guard's been here. So even natural disasters can produce that type of trauma where mortality for the moment is threatened, and then therefore it's kind of hard to think about anything else when you're like unclothed and you don't have food and you don't have a stable living environment. And this all goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically states that if you address the main human concerns, then everything else is allowed to happen afterwards. And I think about this because there's a lot of artists that are living in really terrible conditions right now. And when you're into that, I just want you to understand that it's okay for you to take a pause for a little while or take a pause for a day, because you have to address that. Like, if you have no energy because you have no food and you don't have safe shelter, or you don't have access to everything because of your very unfortunate circumstances, that's real, but it's not an art block. That is, again, a life block, and it's a block via a mortality threat. Are you experiencing this? Because I certainly hope not, but if you are, I just want to shine some light on it and give some credence to it, and I really hope that it improves soon. Now, this next one, I'm going to say all of this with absolute love, with absolute sensitivity as much as I can, but also I'm going to need to give you some tough love on this one because I see this one all the time. Typically, when I talk to a lot of artists, okay, we're definitely prone to a lot of mental health concerns, and we're prone to things like anxiety, depression. We also have a high amount of people that have neurotypical concerns, like they have ADHD or they have autism or something else that makes them neurodivergent. And I definitely want to encourage you, first off right now, is that that's not going to be why you can't perform as an artist, why you can't be successful as an artist. And I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say by telling you that when I was a young child, I was diagnosed with so many of the things that I'm speaking about. And when I see so many artists do, and I used to do the same thing too, so I know what you're going through, but you used to probably say things like, oh, I can't do this because I have this, and I won't do this because I have this, and it's just not possible for me because I have this. And I used to say all these things too. And I see so many people battling for their diagnosis. But the unfortunate side effect is that I tend to see a lot of artists that run to the excuse of their diagnosis for a reason why they feel art blocked. And look, the hardest part about dealing with any type of mental health concern, especially one that is properly diagnosed by a professional, and especially one if you are taking medication to help you regulate it so that you can be healthy and that you can be an active and productive person, is that all too often, you're told by professionals what you can't do. You can't do this, you can't do that, you don't operate like this, you don't operate like that. And what it starts to become is basically like people are giving you an instruction manual to something that's not you. It's almost like if you bought a TV and it's an instruction manual and a remote to a different model and a different brand that's not you. And what I want to just encourage you to do is to instead think about that, challenge that, and instead reconsider, is that really the case? Or is that just what I'm being told and therefore I'm developing a hard belief system on it that's going to take me out of what I actually want to do? But here's the thing, y'all, it's not going away and it's not going to change. So you can either fight it, like trying to fight a current, or you can work with it. And another thing I'm going to ask you to consider too is that even though you might be neurodivergent in some type of way, and that you might have a diagnosis that tells you that it's difficult for you to do things, it's not impossible unless you think it is so. And just as an example here, like if you have ADHD, the most common excuse I hear, oh, I can't focus because I have ADHD. And that's wholly wrong. Actually, when you have ADHD, it's not that you can't focus, it's that you can't focus on tasks of which you deem to be uninteresting or meaningless for you. So I just want to ask you this, are you just using that as a blanket excuse, or is art meaningless and therefore uninteresting to you? Because you can't have it both ways with that. And then the other thing I would ask you to consider as well is this, are you running for a diagnosis as a distraction from it? Because just one, I would say, really toxic mindset that I see really prevalent in the art community is that if you have difficulty, and I see this all the time in comments of videos, I see it in mine too, where people express that they have difficulty performing, they have difficulty staying artistic, they have difficulty staying creative, and then they immediately want to run and go get diagnosed with something. Like, oh, you must have ADHD. Oh, I used to do that too. I used to have it, and I have anxiety. And then the worst thing too is when I see people running for a prescription. Like I literally had somebody in my comment, I deleted it because I thought it was horrible and I didn't want anybody to ever read it or consider it. They actually recommended that somebody go ahead and get Prozac because they weren't feeling creative. That is so bad. That is so wrong. Why is your first instinct to just go ahead and run to mess with your biology, to put chemicals into your system for it? They are not the end all be all. They're not going to solve the problem. You need exterior help and resources in order to do that. And if you're just running for a diagnosis because you feel like you can't sit down and pay attention, so you're naturally going to think that you have ADHD, another statistic that I recently read that was pretty alarming, I read this in a scientific journal, is that roughly 80% of all ADHD cases are misdiagnosed. Look, the hardest part I fully understand about coming to the realization that you can work through it, not against it, is that you have to challenge what you've been told that you can't do. And then a lot of it does have a lot of validity to it too, where maybe you can't do it one way, that doesn't mean that you're just damned to not do it at all. What it instead means, when I want to offer you the opportunity to reconsider, is this, friend: who is somebody in the world who is doing what you want to do at a higher level than you're currently doing, that is currently struggling right now with exactly what you have, or a worse version of what you have, and they've been able to figure it out? So then I offer this to you. You can do it too. But your perception that this is your excuse is not going to serve you long term unless your objective here is to never make art again. And I say this because that's what I had to also overcome in my childhood in order to get to where I am right now. Now I want to ask you this big one. Do you hear voices like all the time? And look, I'm not talking about your voice. I'm talking about other people. And I want to ask you, what are those voices saying to you? Are they telling you that art is worthless? You can't pursue it. That's not what we do. People around you don't do that. You're going to be homeless. You're going to be jobless. Oh, AI can do that better. No, men don't do that, or women don't do that, or that's not your place, or oh, that's dead. Are you being told that art is childish, that it's time to grow up? Oftentimes, and tell me if you've ever experienced this down below, that when you're working on your artwork, do you ever notice how these thoughts just kind of fly in, that when you're working creatively, that maybe you didn't realize this, but you're actually doing really deep work. It's deep human work, because when you're creating, you're actually exploring your interiority. And therefore, when you are experiencing a block and you typically stop, it's typically because of the fact, not that you want to, but it's because of the fact that you start to feel invaded. You're invaded by all these voices of all these people that are just not helping you. And typically when you're surrounded by a circle of jerks that are telling you all the time that everything that you're doing is not going to be worthwhile, you start to have that bout of imposter syndrome. You have to start to have that doubt. You start to have that anxiety. And then when you make a mistake, when your drawing doesn't come out right, when it doesn't start to immediately look the way that you want it to, or it starts to go through the ugly phase, this is when you start to feel reinforced by what they've said and you start to doubt yourself. Am I talking to you? Am I reading your brain right now? One of the most important things I'm going to encourage you to do is to safeguard your thoughts, and also really safeguard yourself around the people that you are choosing to keep a circle with. Because every single micro failure that you have, which you're going to have loads of failure along your way to artistic success, is going to produce the effect where you're going to hear the echo of somebody that gave you a reason to stop, pause, and to give up your art. Now, I also need to ask yourself this: are you being a jerk to yourself because you need to evict that tenant that is living rent-free in your head? If you're putting yourself down, if you're constantly telling yourself that you suck, that you're not good enough, you're not talented, all of these things, they start to become a belief system in you that will never help you. And then every single time that you try and be creative and oopsie daisy, one thing doesn't go right, or maybe one artwork doesn't look to your expectation, well, guess what? Then you validate yourself. And that's why it's not real. It's just a phenomenon that you invent because you are the progenitor of that feeling of inadequacy that made you stop, not an art block. And I just want to ask you to reconsider this, my friend, okay? Is that even if you're not in the best circumstances, and yeah, like all artists, we're not born like with silver spoons in our mouths, okay? And we definitely battle with some things that some people don't. And there are some of us that are born way more fortunate. Like, I'm just gonna say it, like I would probably have a way better channel if I was like gorgeously attractive and younger and stuff. But hey, I'm not. I'm here and I'm trying to help you all as best as I can. But because of that, I think that too, you have to realize that could be the reason, not why you fail, but every reason that you think you could fail could be the reason that you succeed if you just are able to reframe it like that. And just to give you a hot take, go ahead and remove the people in your life that reinforce your negative thought patterns and your negative belief system in yourself as often and as quickly as possible, because that will instantly allow you to actually step into the role that you were born to be, that you want to be, and then you're actually going to be able to labor towards. How's that? And now that you're not afraid of art block anymore, did you know that there's actually this issue that's facing artists that's way worse than art block? Check this out. Now let's name this energy demon, because just to describe it a little bit, you ever feel like you're just driving on an empty tank? Like it's just this overwhelming, crippling feeling of just bleh. And to put this into perspective with myself, I just recently came off of finishing off 4 commissions. I had to write a 50-page research set of papers for my dissertation program. And then I also just did a 20-hour long edit for a sponsorship video last week. And then on top of that, I had to write another 10 pages for my program. And I was just like, man, this is crazy. Like at the end of it, I just felt completely sucked dry. Like there's just no more left in me after all that was done. And do you ever just feel like all your creative wells are just empty? Like they've just completely gone and dried up on themselves? Well, this is an effect that I started to notice ever since I started working with people one-on-one in my art mentorship. And I would notice that whenever people finish out a project, like a really big project or a set of projects, is that they would feel really low energy the week after. And this effect is what I have deemed artistic recoil. And it's the same exact way that when a gun fires, it cocks back. It's the same way that if you ever get punched, it kind of reverberates through your body. It's the same way that if your car ever has to stop abruptly, what's it do is it goes forwards and backwards real quick. So in the same way, in the same vein of thought, whenever you're done with a really big, taxing workload, whenever you finish a really big, hard project, whenever you've been working on something for a long time, you've been laboring over it forever, okay? And then at the end of it, do you ever just feel like it's just completely sucked everything out of you as if it was just some type of artistic vampire? Now, this can get mistaken for burnout, but my friend, it's not, because realistically, what's happened here is that your creative wells have just completely been exhausted. This is completely manageable, and I'm gonna teach you how to do that in this video. The difference between this and burnout is that, first off, I just wanna put this out there, but there's actually no such thing as art burnout. The only type of burnout that you can experience is from a life burnout, okay? And I have a lot of thoughts on this. If you want to hear that, definitely tell me about it down below if you're interested in a video on that topic and art burnout and stuff, because I definitely have a lot to say that I think could help you. Because just to be honest, everything that you go through in your life is just a normal part of being human. It's nothing wrong with it. And this is a normal phenomena that I notice so many artists crumbling under after they finish a project, and then you feel resistance into the next project, and then you don't want to go ahead and do it anymore. And you find ways to kind of meander through it before you'll actually feel bad, and then you'll start a new thing. So that's what we don't want to do. And I want to help you through today, because the feeling is real, but the burnout is not. It's actually just artistic recoil. And here's how you're going to start to combat this and never have a problem with it again. Now, can I be very honest with you? When I'm done with the project, I have intense feelings of just resistance and anxiety over starting the next project. And I'm always starting a next project. I'm currently starting a next project while I'm finishing up another project. And do you ever feel this way? Like, do you ever just feel like it doesn't matter how much you're getting paid or how great the opportunity is or what you could potentially make or that great idea, but you just feel like you just come to a complete halt on it? Well, here's a strategy that I started to implement, and I'm actually doing this more and more with people in my mentorship, and it is how you can plan for the next success. So here's the best way to do that, friend, okay? So go ahead, pull up your artwork, get it out of your studio, pull it up on your computer, however you're looking at it. And here's the best way that you can analyze it, and this is gonna invigorate you. So what we wanna do is we wanna identify 3 things on it. First off, where are your successes? Listen, even if you don't feel like hyper triumphant, you're not looking at this as like, man, this is the best staple of my life type of artwork, right? Go ahead and take a look though at where did you grow? Because I guarantee you, if you've been doing it and you've been doing it consistently, you're growing. So where was it? Maybe you did that ear a little bit better. Maybe the nose actually looks good. Oh, hey, maybe that tree in the background looks okay. Or like, hey, I kind of like my color palette up on here. Maybe my values were a little bit better than last time. There's always something to admire. And if you start to tune yourself to see that, it's going to encourage you to want to continue to go on. Now, part 2 on this is you need to look for what do you need to improve, okay? And I have a very systematic way of going through this that helps a lot of people, so listen up. One of the best things that you can do is definitely not overindulge in this, because this is generally if I was like, hey, what do you want to eat? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And then I was like, hey, what do you not want to eat? And you have like 10 places that you don't want to go. People that are married, do you ever feel this with your spouse, all right? You're like, hey, honey, where do you want to go? And they'll be like, oh, wherever you want to go, baby. And then you'll list off 10 restaurants and they'll say no. It's the same thing with this, okay? So take a look at your artwork. Take a look at, okay, where do I want to go with this one, okay? Maybe I need to do a better job at rendering the faces. Maybe I need to do a better job with anatomy. Maybe I need to do a better job with dynamic posing, okay? So from that, here's what I want to limit you on. Limit yourself to 3 things, no more than 3 things. I need to do these 3 things in order to be the best version of this artwork. If I were to redo this, this is what I would focus on. And then in your next artwork, you're gonna go ahead and pick one of those 3 things, and that's gonna be your focus. That way, you're gonna see continuous growth, and you can do that in the next one too. The third part on this, real simple, is you need to ask yourself, what do you need to challenge yourself on more? Okay, so this can be in the pre-planning phases. Because I bet that while you were going through that, you thought to yourself like, man, I should have gotten all these references. I had no idea what this thing looked like, or like that dog, woof, that thing is barking, but it needs to be put down because it looks so bad, right? Or you're looking at it from the perspective of like, man, I can't tell what that background is. It just looks like pudding back there. Or you're looking at your character's clothing and you're just like, I don't know, man, this person's robe is so wrinkled. It looked like it's been left on the floor for days. Identify where you want to challenge yourself more, okay? Maybe you need to create more dynamic compositions. Maybe you need to use a lot more color in it. Maybe you need to try something new. Maybe you've been avoiding a tool. Maybe you've been avoiding a procedure. Maybe you watched an awesome YouTube tutorial and you're like, man, I want to try that, but you were too scared to do it in this piece, so do it in the next one. So from that, derive about 3 things, and again, choose one of them for the next piece. Through doing this process, here's what you're going to do, is that you are going to be more focused on looking forward than looking backward. Because in this process, what I'm trying to stop you from doing is looking forward without looking backward. And it's important for you to look backward at what you have done and where your gains have come from artistically, so then therefore it propels you forward. And also what's good about this process is it allows you to breathe in what you've been doing and how that's been successful for you. How's that sound? Are you doing this already, by the way? Now, the next majorly helpful thing for you to do at this point is to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, because I'm here for you all the time to help you be a better artist and help you achieve the art goals of your dreams. And hey, look, maybe you've been trying this for a while and you know this stuff already, but you just can't implement it. And that's where my one-on-one art mentorship comes into play. Listen, this is not a course, it's not a class, it's me and you working one-on-one to accomplish the things that you want to do at the pace you want to do it. I've helped people just like you totally supercharge their art business and be able to achieve everything that they didn't think they'd be able to do for years in a matter of months. And if that sounds like you, then go ahead and check out the link in my description, fill out the form, and I'll reach out to you soon. And what's really going to change your life too is when you start to do this. All right, artists, the first thing I want you to know is whenever you feel the effect of artistic recoil, you finished out that big thing, you closed out that client, you closed out that commission, or you've just been learning really hard. First thing that I want to let you know is that how you're feeling is totally real. I want to validate you. It's not abnormal. It's not weird. It is not disordered. Like, that is a very default mode on humans, is when you are done doing something really intense, is that naturally you're gonna feel a little drained. That is just a normal symptom of just duress upon our human conditions. There's nothing wrong with that. However, though, one thing that I definitely want to urge you just to consider, my friend, to totally shape everything that you do, is to just follow me on this. The way that you're going to handle that and the way that you're going to interpret that is going to determine how much you bring into the next project and how much your artistic future is dependent upon how you handle the next 3 days. Because honestly, whenever you're done with a really big project, whenever you're done learning something, whenever you're done applying yourself more than what you normally would or could in any particular given circumstance, generally what happens is that excavates a lot of deep feelings down here. And things surface and things arise. What I want to urge you to consider, friend, is to not run away from that feeling, because if you run away from what you're currently doing, you're also running away from your potential. So what I like to encourage you to do is this instead. I want you to question it. Why do I feel this way? How did that come up? What made me think about this? Because over the next 3 days, I guarantee you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to find ways to just completely avoid art altogether, or you're going to get back on the horse and you're going to be able to keep creating as you were doing before. Give yourself a period for which it's okay for you to sit there and ponder on it, but not sit there and feel bad about yourself for it, not feel bad enough to want to produce more negativity, to want to produce more negative self-talk, to be overly critical of yourself, because, my friend, there is absolutely no point in you expending all of that beautiful mental energy of yours on feeling bad about yourself for it. But that is just the shockwave of artistic recoil talking. Do you ever do this? Do you ever feel like this prevents you from doing what you want to do? Here's another thing for you to consider. Now, how would you like to turbocharge your revitalization? Because literally when you hit this wall called artistic recoil, what you're gonna feel is just like there's nothing there and you've lost inspiration. And even if you had a great idea, maybe you just lost it. Like the train just took off and you're there standing on the station, like watching it just fade off into the distance, right? So here's a tactic that I started to do. And I did this a couple years ago, and man, it was such a big transformation to how I continued to move forward with it and how it inspired me to want to make even better art, okay? So one of the things that I did is I used the template that's in my description and I made some influence maps. And if you remember these, they were really big in like the early 2000s and 2010s. And basically what I did was I made a separate inspiration sheet for every single artist or art style or company that I loved, and I put that up. Now here's a really key clutch thing. You want to surround yourself with inspiration. You want to surround yourself with artists and artwork, or maybe a company that you want to work for, or a project that you want to be a part of, and put that up there. And you got to do it in a physical way, okay? It's not good enough for it to just be your phone background. It's not good enough for it just lie and die somewhere in the recesses of your hard drive, okay, friend? What you got to do is you got to put that up there. And it's especially most practical when you can put that up in a space that you are actually working in. So like for me, I have this directly across the wall from my drawing tablet. As I'm drawing, I'm looking up and boom, there's all my inspirations, okay? And this is so helpful for me because literally if I get stuck or if I'm like, man, what's up with the lighting on this? Or like, I can't balance this correctly. I'll literally get up and I'll go look over at those. And that gives me so much guidance, okay? What most people are doing though, is they're doing this in a really toxic way. Because what are you doing instead? You're gonna say, oh, I'm looking for inspiration on Instagram or something. And what you're doing there is you're actually not looking for inspiration, you're just looking for comparison. And I don't know about you, but like I follow hundreds, probably like 1,000 or so artists. And every single one of them, different style, different medium, different subject matter. And that leads to a lot of creative confusion and you just feel bad about yourself. So instead, have some targeted inspirations, print it out, get it physically out there, and just surround yourself with it, okay? This will be game changing and it'll also lead you as a North Star towards your success. Try it out. All right, so here's a hot take on a topic that most people would never even touch with the 20-foot pole. So let me just guess here. You're probably so stress avoidant that any version of stress, you're probably avoidant of that too. Because honestly, like the term stress is seemingly such a pejorative nowadays, isn't it? Like you just can't touch it. It's negative. It's all bad. But is it really? Because here's an effect that you've probably never heard of, and it's actually a really positive thing. So did you know there's actually a positive version of stress? It's called eustress. And I want to introduce this concept to you. Eustress is what you feel when you have exited something that is very difficult. And you can think about this as if you were to complete a marathon, as if you were to set a new PR for lifting, as if you were to get an A on your final exam, as if you were to go ahead and land a big client, as if you were to just finish out a big project. How's that sound for you? But going through that, naturally, you do feel the effects of stress. But eustress is actually a positive interpretation of how that went and how you felt at the end of it. And I've never heard a lot of people talk about this before, but it is so critical to your success and your sustainability as an artist, because through eustress, at the end of that, you feel triumph. You feel great. You feel victorious, don't you? When you're done with that big project, when you can look back at that thing and be like, oh man, I did it. You did that. You made that. You conquered that task, right? And have you ever thought about like, why do people do ridiculously grueling challenges? Why do they put themselves through that? Like, have you ever heard of like ultramarathon runners? Like these people that run like hundreds of miles over the course of 2 or 3 days and without stopping? Like that's crazy. But why do they do that? It's because of the effect of eustress. And my friend, I'm gonna give you some advice too. Like maybe you've never felt that triumph before, but that might just be because of how you're interpreting that event or how you're interpreting your success. And how about this? What if you're just avoiding looking for your minor successes? So my friend, what if you started to see that stress that you're feeling as actually the presence of eustress in your life, the feeling of feeling good, because without that, you would actually never feel satisfied, never feel motivated to make anything else again. But if you embrace this stress and not see it as a big bad boogeyman in your artistic life, then you can definitely continue on with it and it's gonna fuel you rather than drain you. How's that sound? Now, I got a big bomb drop on you, and it's that there's a leech in your creative life and it's sucking all the energy, all out of your art flow and your creativity and your energy. And it's taken all of that steam away from your engines, and it's preventing you from being the best version of yourself and bring the best energy into the next piece. And to show you what this is, let me ask this question. Why don't you go ahead and look around your space right now? How's it feel? Like literally, the space in which you are creating art. How do you feel being in that space, in occupying that area of whatever studio or your home or your office, whatever it is, okay? How do you feel sitting there? Do you feel like it is a prison? Do you feel like it's suboptimal? Do you feel like some level of dread in sitting down? A lot of times what we don't think about is the energy in our spaces, okay? And we don't think about how we design a space for it to encourage us or discourage us in order to be there. And as an artist friend, you either thrive on that energy or you do not, and you die on that energy. So have you ever thought about this? What if you designed your space to be a space that you want to go to, you're compelled to be in, that you don't mind working in, so that if you do put in some long time, you do put in some long hours, you don't sit there and you just feel, ugh. What if instead you felt, ha? So I can definitely relate to this one because I actually just recently overhauled my office space. And since doing that, I gotta tell you, man, it has been a big game changer for me. Like, I literally walk into my office now and I'm like, ah. And listen, I'm not on any Mark Brunet level here with like $50,000 worth of stuff, okay? But literally, just cleaning it up, just getting a couple things here and there. Like every month, I've just been like getting a little thing here and a little thing there, and just decluttering, organizing. That makes such a massive difference. And this has transformed it from me walking in and being like, okay, let's draw today, into like, oh man, I get to draw. This is an amazing opportunity. I love this space. Like, I've literally caught myself just looking around and smiling multiple times. And I've actually recommended this to people that I work with too. I had one of my mentees recently who actually took this to a really easy, great level. And all they did was that they cleaned up their space and they got some little organization stuff, and then they painted the room. And they told me like they were so inspired the next time that they sat down. So let me ask you, how can you do this? Can you clean up your crap? Can you pick up your trash? Can you go ahead and maybe wash down your desk once in a while? Can you get rid of the old nasty paint cups and maybe replace it, or at least go wash it out? Can you go ahead and just figure out how you can create a more comfortable space? Y'all, I can remember just through all the times and all the different types of tablets I've had in being a digital artist, how many times I have just suffered through something that was really uncomfortable to sit at, or just some posture that sucked. And we do that, and it's just expected to be there. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm gonna encourage you this. Think about this. How can you enable yourself to do better work? How can you enable yourself to love that too? Because if you can conquer that hill, then you won't mind doing the work, and you feel encouraged to do it, and you're gonna feel way more inspired the next time that you get to do that. How's that sound? Or have you recently done this? If so, tell me about it, because I'd love to hear about it. All right, now let me tell you why at this point, in order to get that nice feeling of eustress, what you need is a fill up, okay? And just like when your tank runs empty on your car, what do? You gotta go to the gas station and fill it up. So how do you do this as a human being, okay? And maybe how should you not? When you're done with the project, you hit this 3-day stride where, like I said earlier, what are you gonna do? This is when you're either going to propel yourself forward to want to work on your next piece, or you're gonna go ahead and find a lot of reasons why you shouldn't anymore. And this is when I'm gonna encourage you to do human things. Now, I know that might sound a little weird coming from me if you've ever watched my content, but listen, I'm not a grindaholic. I like life. I want you to enjoy life too. And I'm gonna give you some strategies for how to do this, and do this very efficiently through this. So what am I recommending? Go outside, go for a walk, do some exercise, maybe take a class, go and be social, okay? Spend some time with your loved ones, read a great book, watch a great movie. Maybe you just got a game, you can play that for a little bit, okay? Because what happens around artistic recoil is that you generally might consider yourself unable to continue on, unable to persist, unable to create the next thing. And then you're gonna say to yourself this magical phrase, well, this just doesn't work for me. And that's usually why artists dump out. They're gonna be like, well, this whole thing, it just doesn't work for me, Sean. I can't keep up with this. And to an extent on that, it's just because you're not working for it. And you're not working in such a way that you can sustain it. You've got 72 hours. Do something great in that time. But here's the thing with that. You have to put a strong cap. You must put a limit on that. You must make sure that you put some type of time limit, because if you don't, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen, because I've personally experienced it and I've watched many a person experience it too. When I'm working with people one-on-one in my mentorship, or when I'm just working with people in my average teaching job, I noticed that people will just find ways to just embed themselves into numbing activities, embed themselves into just copious amounts of games, or copious amounts of watching Netflix, or copious amounts of doom scrolling. And that's not gonna help you. That's not even a human thing that's gonna refill you. Now let me tell you why you deserve a Scooby Stack and why you're better at training a dog than training yourself. So if you've ever tried to train an animal, one of the best systems that's been recognized in recent years is that you should actually positively reward positive behavior and therefore encourage it. How does this relate to your artwork? Well, when you're enveloped in artistic recoil and you're just feeling completely empty and you're feeling dejected and you're feeling completely unmotivated, this is typically when you're going to invite a lot of negative self-talk. Your inner critic's going to come out. So let me ask, how much time are you slamming yourself? How much time are you looking down at your artwork like, man, that sucks. I'm never gonna do that better. What's up with that? How come this person's so much better than me? How did they do it? How did they develop so much more? Man, I've got so much more ground that I have to cover, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it before I die. Here's the problem, is that you're training your brain to associate negativity with art making. You're actually training yourself out of liking the process. You're training yourself out of not being able to enjoy it, because you're not looking for what's good, you're looking for what sucks. And one major thing about our brain is that it is literally wired for negativity as a survival mechanism. So instead, friend, when you're experiencing the effects of artistic recoil, start to look for, what are you proud of in that piece? What do you like? Again, revisit how you can take a look at your plus, minus, and delta on that. And then to exemplify a better way of thinking about this, let me offer you what Bruce Lee has to say, who says that you need to mind your words, for the body cannot tell the difference, and you will start to physically feel the effects of what you tell yourself. So in this, here's just a basic philosophy, okay? Is that your words become your story, and your story becomes your truth, the truth that you accept, and your truth becomes a self-fulfilling philosophy. And that philosophy transforms itself into a paradigm for your life, and that will allow you to either have success or have a whole lot of excuses. It's your choice. Artists, I gotta ask you this. Why do you act like you're in prison? Why do you feel like you're an inmate? Like you are just a prisoner of your feelings? And when you're talking about what you have to do, what you have to work on, the time you have to put in, the obligation that you have, I just wanna ask you this. How does that feel to say? Have you ever really thought about the power behind that, of having to say to yourself like, oh, I have to work on this today, or I have to do that, or I have to make that look better, or I have to be a professional, or I have to get into this industry, or I have to get paid, or else I'm not gonna be able to feed my family today, or I have to make sure that I look into how to do this better, and I have to do this, or else. Admit it. You feel terrible about that, right? You just feel like you're caged in and there's just no exit for it, don't you? And this is where you gotta be really mindful of the power of your words here, because when you're talking about what you have to do, you're coming from a place of resistance. You're coming from the place of almost like when a parent would ask a child to do something and then inevitably they buck back, they don't wanna do that, okay? In the same vein of thought, that's exactly what you're doing too, by feeling that you are forcing yourself to do it. So how do you transform this completely? Here's what it is that I want you to view it as an opportunity over that obligation from it. And it's really important that you see art as something that is a blessing and a privilege and an opportunity to be able to do. I want you to understand this really well. All the AI bros out there, they wish that they could do what you could. They wish that they had the dedication. They wish that they had the discipline to learn this craft. That's why, literally, like just to kind of quote Invincible here, but like look what they had to make just to emulate a fraction of what we could do here. And I want you, Fred, give yourself some credit. Stop viewing art as something that is a chore, a labor, a task, because what do you think about when you think of a chore or an errand? You hate it. There's no joy in that. There's no passion behind that. So following that logic, you really need to think about how you're wording that and how you're feeling on that. So instead you can transform into like, I get to. Psych yourself up for it. Y'all, you probably don't know this, but like literally I psych myself up before I go ahead and I start every single video. Like there's literally always 5 seconds of me before I record every single one of these. And I just go, let's help some artists today. Or if I'm feeling really spunky, I'll be like, let's change some artists' lives. And I get myself pumped up so that I feel excited about doing this and making this content for you. And I hope you're enjoying it, by the way, too. But on this topic, what if you could tune yourself out of anxiety and crank up the excitement? Wouldn't that be great? Now, have you heard about the most toxic art addictions that are holding you back and killing your art? Check these out, and hopefully you're not doing any of these. Now, as a creative person, you feel pulled in a lot of different directions, don't you? You want to try this, you want to try that. You look over here and there's something really cool and exciting, and oh, look at that, a new pen, a new paper. And then over here, wow, I've never tried that before. Look at that cool new program, right? Because you are a creative person, your soul is just crying to keep trying new things and new things and new things. But have you ever thought that that's not a very healthy addiction either? Maybe what if you considered the fact that you bouncing around all the time is not helping you get better at the thing that you really do want to? Or do you even know what you want to get good at? Do you even know what you want to do? Do you even know what you actually want to pursue? Y'all, this brings up an addiction that I call toxic dabbling. And listen, I full on get this, especially if you've had any experience in art academia. This is traditionally how it goes. You try this, that, and the other thing. But that's all good because art is a set of transferable skills. In other words, what you do in one media, it directly translates into another. I'm saying that as an art education professional. However, though, now, what this often really stems from is a non-committal attitude because, to be honest, it's way easier for you to try something new than to go through the pain and discomfort of growing yourself through one thing that you really do want to get good at. And maybe tell me this, are you afraid of committing to one thing? Are you afraid that you're gonna feel boxed in or something like that? Well, I got some great advice for you right here. Because it's easier to feel like a novice than it is to feel like a mediocre artist, then here's what I'm gonna recommend for you, friend. Go ahead and just pick one main thing that you wanna do, just one. Just pick one of those, okay? And dedicate about 60 to 75% of your time towards that main thing. And then you can go ahead and spend the other like 25 to 40% doing the other things that come up. Y'all, I get it. Like every single year, there's a whole bunch of new things or new materials or new programs that come out and you want to have a go at it, right? It's natural. You're curious. That's all good, man. But if you do not ever try to commit to one thing, to get good at that one thing, I promise you this, you'll just be known for nothing. Do you really want that? Now, I'm gonna go on a limb here and say you've probably got some amazing ideas, don't you? You've got some amazing ideas for some amazing pieces. You've got some amazing ideas for an IP. Maybe you've got your own story, or you wanna make a video game, or you wanna make a graphic novel, or a manga, or something like that, right? You've got insane ideas. And as a creative person, you're naturally feeling flooded with all of these great ideas because what you do actually produces more great ideas, doesn't it? And then so what do? Then you start to look up, well, how do I get these ideas out of my head? Because they shouldn't just die and suffer in there, right? You should put them down on paper, and then you should do this, and then you should do that, and you should structure it, and then you're gonna learn how to structure your ideas better and how to bring them out. But are you making art? Are you actually doing anything with those ideas? Because I just need to give you a hot take on this, y'all. Your ideas aren't worth that much. And whoa, no, I'm not putting you down, but I'm just gonna say this. You're gonna find a lot of really broke people with a lot of really, really great ideas. So what's the difference here? Is what are you doing, and specifically, what labor are you going through in order to bring those ideas to life? One of the most toxic traits a lot of artists have is that they trick themselves into thinking that somehow their ideas are going to produce a product. And my friend, they won't. You have to be the one that will produce that product. Listen, as somebody that's researched imagination very heavily, and I continue to for my own research in my doctoral program right now, I need to tell you this. Imagination comes from feeding it
and through you laboring over the craft of creating imaginative products. So what I see a lot of artists do, instead of actually, I don't know, like starting to create characters for their comic or starting to create backgrounds or going through iterations for what they could look like, instead what they'll do is they'll overinvest into the story, or they'll overinvest into writing about it, they'll overinvest into thinking about it, and then they don't ever make anything. So my friend, what this really stems from is the fact that you are over-investing into your ideas and you're under-investing into your efforts. And that's not gonna produce anything, my friend. And your idea that's so great, no one's ever gonna care about it because no one's ever gonna know about it. So how do you get past this? You gotta balance this, okay? Listen, if you wanna sit there and bang out an arc of your story that you've got, then what you need to do is you need to section off. Okay, I'm only gonna do this, and then I'm gonna create it. And then I'm only gonna do this, and I'm only gonna create it. And by all means, look up how to do really great narrative structures. Look up how to tell a story. Look up how to get your writing better or how to get your dialogue better for your characters, okay? But if you're only doing that, you're not being a visual artist. And that's fine if you want to be a literary artist, but pick a lane. Because if you do want to be a visual artist, then you actually have to make it. You can't just let that idea linger in your head and die. Now, this next unhealthy artist addiction might surprise you, but let me just guess this. You're probably putting forth a lot of effort into learning your craft, right? You're putting a lot of effort into all of your practices, and you're putting a lot of effort into trying new things, and you're putting a lot of effort into you just diving into art all the time. Maybe you're even living and breathing this. Maybe you're even feeling exhausted by it, right? Well, that's the toxic trait here, is that you're over-investing into being an artist and under-investing into being a human. And this brings up a really philosophical question of what is art? Philosophically speaking, and I'm speaking from a research standpoint here, is that art is an interior reflection of yourself. And that's why many people don't like to be artists. It is not because it's too hard. It's not because it's inaccessible. It's not because it's elite. It's not because it's gatekept or any crap like that, like the AI bros say. Instead, it's because people don't like to explore themselves. It's because people think that somehow that if you just pound away at skills and skills and skills and skills and skills, you are going to level up into this like mega awesome art guru. Y'all, that's not going to be the case. And that's not something that I promote either on my channel. Honestly, what you have to do is you have to level up both the artwork and the artist. And if you're neglecting the artist, you friend, then you are never gonna get to the place that you want to be, because you forgot half of the reason why you actually like this. Because in exploring yourself as an artist, and that's what you are, y'all, you're an explorer, is you are going to combat everything that people don't like to do. Every thought, every insecurity. You're gonna have to deal with failure. You're gonna have to deal with loneliness. You're gonna have to deal with also developing, though, peace and confidence. And how do you combat difficult times? How do you emotionally handle things versus you just run away from them? By leveling up your mindset, you will level up as an artist. I guarantee it, because in growing into the artist you want to be, you have to think differently than how you currently do right now. And if you are neglecting that, you are also neglecting your potential growth. And that is literally why all throughout my channel, I promote this concept of developing the artist and the artwork together to develop some type of mindfulness. And if you're in for that, please make sure that you like and subscribe, because I'm here to support every facet of you being an artist just like this, to let you know that you need to develop yourself. You need to invest into your mindset. You need to invest into your personal development as well. And if you need some resources for that, let me know down below, and I'll definitely recommend you some people to watch too. In my interactions with artists, both young and old and everything in between, what do you think the number one thing that everybody complains about is? What is the number one thing that you wish you had more of? What do you wish that you just had insane, copious amounts of? I'm talking about time here, y'all. Do you ever feel like, hey, I don't have enough time? Or no, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or there's just not enough time for me to invest into my artwork, or I wish I had more time, or I don't have 8 hours a day to dedicate to my artwork. Y'all, this is a really toxic trait of artists who are not getting to where they want to be, because artists love to complain about a lack of time. And y'all, I just need to let you know this. The artists that you look up to, that you admire, that you follow on social media right now, and y'all have the same 24 hours a day. The way that you're going to get to where you want to go, friend, is not by you having more time, but it's about you utilizing the time that you currently have. It's about how are you managing your time, but then also this too. Where are your dead zones? Where are your pitfalls? Where are your speed traps? You need to think about this instead, rather than you complaining about, like so many artists do, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. But let me just ask you this question. If I were to follow you around for an entire week, would I see pockets of time where I'm like, excuse me, yeah, you could be working on some artwork right now. Hey, poke. You can definitely go ahead and do that thing that you said you didn't have enough time for. Or how about this too? Check your screen time lately? I bet you can find yourself some more time on that one. While time is a resource that all artists do complain about, here's the thing that I want to encourage you to do instead. I want you to view your time as a resource, and it is a resource that you need to harness and you need to exploit to do better, because you can do it better if you manage your time better, if you eliminate your distractions in a more efficient way, and if you stop complaining about what you do or you don't have, because I guarantee you this, there's somebody that's in infinitely less circumstances than you are right now watching this video, who is not as privileged as you, who doesn't have the blessings that you do, who is gonna do more than you. So if they can do it, what's your excuse? So I've got some really great ideas for you on how to do this. Number one is that you have to commit to it. You have to take it seriously. And what that means is that you're gonna have to feel comfortable eliminating distractions. Not to say all the way, my friend, but limit it. So what you're gonna have to do is limit some of the stuff that we're talking about in this video today, because it's toxic for you and it's not gonna help you, friend. Here's another thing you could start to do, and I always recommend this, but start to personify your artwork, okay? Treat it like it is a child. It's your child, okay? Look, my kids come to me and say, Daddy, I'm hungry. I'm not like, I don't really feel like it today. I don't have enough time for that. Or, there's no time for me to eat dinner. I mean, do you really have to eat? We did that yesterday. So if I wouldn't do that to them, why would you do that to your artwork? Treat it just like that, because you probably will have a worse time letting someone else down than letting yourself down, won't you? Now, have you ever noticed how many artists have really bad chronic physical conditions? How many artists have wrist pain, and joint pain, and muscle tenderness, and wrist tenderness, and everything like that? Have you ever noticed how many artists basically, even in their adulthood, still have the physique of like a 12-year-old ballet dancer? One of the things that I think is really over-glorified in artwork, and tell me if you've noticed this too, is we really glorify inactivity. And listen, I get it. I really, really do. Because what are you doing when you're making artwork? You're doing literally the most unhealthy thing for you, physically speaking. You're sitting down, you're hunched over, and you're drawing for hours, and you're solely focused there. And where are you typically? You're also inside. We have this really bad, slothful trait about us, where because we are solely locked into being indoors and in terrible postures for us, and because we're not physically active, we are then prone to so many bad chronic conditions. And I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'm not ignorant on that. Of course, some things are outside of your control, y'all, and I can't speak on how to do that better because I'm not a doctor on it. But I do want to speak to you about the fact that you can do a lot of preventative things. And what I want to encourage you to start to do, y'all, is to think about this. If you are more active, you will be more creatively active. If you can spur the physical body, you will also then champion your artistic body. Have you ever thought of it like that? So what can you do, y'all? Listen, I'm not saying that you need to start running 100-mile race ultra marathons, okay? But just think about this. How can you start to incorporate a little more physical activity from you? Like, how can you go ahead and take walks, ride bikes? Can you start to go to the gym? Can you do some stuff at home? Y'all, you're on YouTube right now. There are like 10-minute workouts that you can do in a day. Again, if you're complaining, I don't have any time, Sean, well, listen, you've got 10 minutes a day. I 100% guarantee you can fit that into your schedule. What else can you do from that one? Can you make it a group effort? Do you want to take some group classes? Do you want to do it maybe with your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend? How could you do that? How could you incorporate more physical activity? And on that note too, how can you get your butt outside? Y'all, we live inside so much of our time here. But listen, what can you do to just inspire your creative soul through your physical being? Because if you're gonna want to sustain your efforts, y'all, you're gonna get really negative, you're gonna get really depressed, you're gonna get really anxious from being inactive and being somebody who has the posture of a jumbo shrimp. It's terrible for y'all, and you need to get your butt up and you need to get outside, and you'd be surprised how many artists that are at a really professional level that prioritize this. And if you wanna get there too, friend, I'm not saying it's the only thing you gotta do, but it could definitely help you out. And even if it doesn't get you to a professional level, it'll make you feel better. Have you ever thought about that? All right, level with me here. Have you ever started to make fun of your own artwork? Have you ever looked at it and been like, woof, this sucks, I'm terrible, what is that? Oh my God, do you ever share your artwork and then you laugh at it with your friends and you're like, look at that jacked up hand, or look at that terrible face, or like, oh God, what was I on when I made this thing? Do you ever then get into these types of conversations? Do these dialogues ring a bell for you? Do they resonate with you a little bit? Because I'm gonna let you know this right now. This just brings up another really toxic addiction that artists have, which is being self-deprecating. Have you ever noticed how many artists almost seemingly enjoy putting themselves down? I'm gonna say they do this in a lot of different ways, that they show nothing but complete disrespect to themselves and their efforts. And what I wanna ask you is this: what does that do for you? Why do you do that? Maybe you feel stressed out. Maybe you're just dissatisfied with it. And I get that, okay? And maybe too, you're lost on how to do better. And that is a totally normal and natural thing. But the issue as to why this is a totally toxic addiction, but the words that you're using, you need to be really guarded with them, especially on your interior dialogue with yourself, much less an exterior dialogue with somebody else. Because what you're doing in creating this nasty process, this toxic cycle of talking down about your artwork, is honestly, you're just looking for permission to quit. You're looking for permission to somehow lower your efforts so that you don't see it as a fruitful endeavor, and then it becomes less meaningful for you. And then by attaching negativity to that experience, boom, you are definitely gonna give up, friend, and I don't want that for you. And I think somewhere deep down, you don't want that either. So what do you do about this, y'all? You gotta admit this, that words have a lot of power. The words that we use to describe ourselves and our products, they have power. Like, I'm gonna say this too, you probably wouldn't speak terribly about your spouse or your kids, at least I hope. So with that, you don't wanna speak that way about your artwork. Now, on the flip side to this, I'm not saying that you need to be blindly optimistic and overly positive. Don't look at it at a really flawed drawing and be like, wow, this is incredible, I am amazing. No, look at it and be like, okay, I'm proud of myself for trying this, and I see these things that I could get better at. And that's how I'm gonna proceed forward with it, is I'm gonna focus on those things from now on. See the difference there? You need to be honest with yourself, but you need to be empowering to yourself too. Because if you don't speak nicely to yourself, how do you expect other people to? All right, now, did you really think I was gonna go through an entire video about unhealthy art addictions without talking about these? Yeah, that's right. I'm talking about the big nasty one. I'm talking about the one that most people clicked on this video to watch me talk about. And yes, I'm talking about substances. I'm talking about any substance, by the way. Doesn't matter if it's legal or illegal, if it's common or uncommon, I'm talking about substances. And when we talk about why do artists actually adopt a reliance on substances to mistakenly think that they're somehow getting better or unleashing their creativity or opening the door to what their potentials are, right? Here's at the crux of what it really is. All substances stem from the ability to numb yourself, to not feel things, to not experience things, to block yourself from experiencing certain aspects of things that are happening or will happen in your life. And I see this with a lot of people, and I've researched this a lot too before I made this video on this topic. And I've found this, is that most people just don't want to go through certain things. Some people are in really lousy circumstances. Some people are not happy with their lives. Some people are disappointed in themselves. And some people would rather not feel what they're going through right now or what they have been because they're afraid to challenge that or to experience that instead of actually dealing with it. And so what most people I found in my research, they turn to substances so that they don't have to feel that, so they don't have to think about that. And they become chemically dependent upon substances in order to not think about that. And the actual reason why people come to develop a chemical dependency, aside from biology and genetics here a little bit, taking that into account here, is actually because they are wired to use that substance. And it can even be simple things. It can be coffee, it can be caffeine, and of course we got the big ones like drugs and alcohol in there. The reason why you're actually hooked onto that, chemically speaking here through your brain, is that is how you actually relax yourself. And you think about this in terms of like smoking. Like I grew up, but my parents smoked and I hated every second of it. Like to this day, tell me, this is you down below, do you hold your breath around people that smoke? Because like I full on could not walk by somebody who's smoking without holding my breath to this day, because I just hate the smell of it. But the reason why people smoke, yes, it is the nicotine, but it's also generally the way that they calm down, because when you smoke, you breathe and you breathe out. And what that actually does is it's actually a physiological way for your body to calm down, is through heavy breathing. And there are a lot of different substances that people use for similar circumstances like that. Now, here's another big one too. Do you use substances because you think that somehow you can't be creative without it, or you unlock your highest version of yourself or anything like that? Y'all, I just need to let you know this. That is completely fallacious. The real thing is that you are not taking care of the things outside of your art life, and it's poisoning your art life and blocking you from leaping into those. And so you are mistakenly telling yourself that you're not able to access those higher planes of creativity, or whatever you want to call it, whatever delusion you want to kind of wrap this into, right? The reality is this: you do have access to that. If you have access to it under one condition, you have the ability to create the conditions to actually access that all the time. The question is this: what are you not dealing with in order to do this? What are you numbing yourself from in order to do that? And listen, we all have our vices. I get that, y'all. But listen, when you are reliant on some exterior force, some exterior item in order to be more creative, you really have to ask yourself, what am I avoiding? And does that really benefit you long term? But also, what's the detriment? What's the side effects of that? Think about that, would you? Now, at the core of why we create artwork, what are we seeking to do here and why? A lot of things come into play here and a lot of things come up. The number one thing that we want to accomplish as an artist is to create a human connection. And that is really what artwork is all about. It's us expressing our humanity to another human, and thus creating some type of dialogue through it, either internally or externally from it. And then that brings into this too. Are you somebody that avoids that? Are you somebody that doesn't seek that out too? Maybe you have some type of anxiety about it. Maybe you have from your past experiences in life. It makes sense, I get it, where you don't want to share because you've had bad experiences, because you've had people that have been overly critical, overly negative about your artwork. Maybe you've had also, and this is so sad to me that I even know all this happens, that have you ever had somebody tell you that your art is worthless, or it's a worthless endeavor too, that it's not gonna ever be something then, friend? This then leads to a lot of toxic social avoidance. And listen, y'all, I just need to let you know this. You're not gonna make it terribly far by only being on your own. You need help, you need support, you need community, and most importantly, you need to start to do things that are going to bring you into more circles of people so that you can go farther and you can do more things, you can get better ideas, and you can stretch your imagination and stretch your skills. And I'm speaking from a very personal level on this. I used to really dislike engaging with other people, and I used to have a lot of anxiety about it, and it was to the point where like I just full on like disconnected with everybody but pretty much just a few people, just close friends, okay? And then one day I kind of came upon this understanding to myself, which is that like, if I really want to affect a lot of people, if I want to hope to impact a lot of people, then I also have to learn how to connect and how to speak with other people. And one thing that I would encourage you to start to do if you're in this boat too is this, friend. Just start to think about what do you need to do just to stretch just a little bit. Maybe you need to just force yourself once a day to engage in small talk with somebody that you normally wouldn't. Or if you have a job, maybe you can be like, okay, I want to just have like a 1-minute conversation with just somebody new here that I've never spoken to about. Maybe too, you need to see this too, is a lot of social interaction is not about you vomiting information about yourself, but you asking questions. So what if you started to think about what types of questions can I engage with other people in? And how can that build some strong connections there? By you engaging and you diving into how to get over and how to work through your social avoidance, and you might need some additional help and resources for that, friend. And if that's you, I fully encourage you to get it. But don't let your past experiences or your past traumas influence your ability to connect or to disconnect with somebody else, because that is a very toxic trait, and I know that you can grow past it too. All right, artists, I think this one's gonna hit pretty hard for you, so let me ask you this. What are you avoiding doing right now? Like this very second, okay? What project do you have in mind that you're not doing, or what assignment that you have for school that you're not doing, or what are you putting off right now? What do you wish that you did last year that you said you're gonna do this year, but you probably won't do it this year either, right? Because something came up, because something else got in the way, because you didn't feel like it. Tell me what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the big P, right? And I'm talking about procrastination. Is this you, friend? Are you somebody that procrastinates all the time? You just keep putting it off and off and off and off and off. And then what happens? Then it never gets done, right? And so many artists struggle with this. Both young and old, I've encountered so many artists that procrastinate. And why is that? We really have to understand what procrastination is, because I think a lot of times it gets mislabeled as you don't care or you're not serious. And I'm gonna tell you this, friend, that's not really the case. What procrastination actually is a mask for insecurity. And I'm telling you this so that you can identify and then move past it. So you are often way more likely to not try something at all than to try it and to feel embarrassed about it or to feel disappointed in yourself by it. At the root of procrastination, it's just that level of insecurity. And so then this brings into the question, well, how do you get past this? On the other side of this, are you a perfectionist? Are you somebody that does this too? Because guess what? Perfectionism at every step of the way is also a form of procrastination, because what you're gonna do is you're gonna sit and you're gonna linger into some part of your artistic process that you know dang well is not gonna serve the greater purpose of it, but you think it will. And then what does it do? You just get so exhausted and you end up putting off that project and you never even finish it. Or it takes you like 35 hours to do a sketch. Is this you? So how do you get past that? First off, I want to release you from the expectation that everything that you're going to do needs to be perfect. I want to release you from the expectation that everything you want to do is going to be postable, is going to be shareable, is going to be Instagram worthy, is going to be something that's going to bring you social media fame or any nonsense like that. Instead, view yourself as just a work in progress. What I want you to do then is to adopt the attitude of what I call the evergreen noob, meaning that you're going to be open to ideas, you're going to be open to suggestions, and most importantly, you're going to be open to making mistakes. I want you to release yourself from those really toxic, overinflated expectations of yourself and what you're supposed to be doing and what it should look like versus what it does look like. Here's another thing too. I'm a self-proclaimed perfectionist. Hello, my name is Sean. I'm a perfectionist. So here's one way that I thought about this. Instead of you letting perfectionism via procrastination ruin your artwork and your process and your love of it, instead, learn to treat your perfectionism like a switch. You're gonna, boom, turn that thing on, but only at a specific time, y'all. I want you to just learn to only be a perfectionist, to only look at those little tiny small details, those little tiny areas in the last 20% of anything that you're working on. I want you to harness that as a weapon for artistic brilliance, rather than a weapon of your own mass destruction. Can you do that? But most importantly, y'all, the number one thing that you can never procrastinate on is hitting that like and subscribe button. Come on, y'all, I'm here to support you all along your artistic journey. And if you could support me back, I would sure appreciate that. And also, I bet you're gonna appreciate not doing this anymore. Hey, is your tank on E? Are you just completely without any type of energy? Or are you thinking that like every single time that you do fuel yourself, that you don't really feel fueled up for very long? And listen, y'all, I'm not talking about your car. No, I'm talking about what are you putting in your mouth? I'm talking about what are you ingesting all the time and how is that contributing or destroying your potential? One of the things that I could personally relate to, because believe it or not, I used to be 80 pounds heavier on this frame, is the toxic trait of having a terrible diet as an artist. And again, like I definitely have always noticed that artists tend to over glorify this really unsustainably terrible diet. It's full of Cheetos and Mountain Dew and ramen noodles and crap cheap foods that are just not going to sustain you long term. And again, the way that I want you to sort of think about this is how are you going to fuel the creative vehicle that is yourself? when you are just putting sawdust into that. It's just not gonna go anywhere, and it sure as heck isn't gonna go far. Your engine's gonna run well for just a little tiny bit, and then boom, what's gonna happen? You're gonna shut down. Have you ever thought about why you might feel a little bit anxious, why you might feel depressed? Well, it might also be because of the fact that you have a crap diet. So also, on the topic of food, we can't also forget about the topic of hydration. Some 75% of people in the US are dehydrated. Y'all, what are you doing when you're not even fueling your basic body? Like, your body is composed of mostly water and you're not giving it water. What are you doing? You drink all kinds of things all day and you never even drink some water? And there are so many people that never touch water pretty much all day. Have you ever thought about how that's destroying your energy and your potential for actually creating artwork or sustaining your efforts or sustaining your focus? It might be that. So now, how do we get through this year? And listen, I get why, because it's easy, because it's quick, because you might even think like, hey, I gotta get back to work here. But listen, how long are you able to really sustain that? It's not very long. So how do you get past this, y'all? No, I'm not saying that you need to go on an all grass-fed, vegan, caveman, paleo diet, Mediterranean diet, anything like that. No, friend, no. All I'm gonna suggest is this. What can you start to do to have a 50% better diet? What can you start to cut out, like 50% of bad stuff that you're cut out? Because listen, real talk, we all love a cheeseburger, french fries, and a Kit Kat bar every once in a while, right? But what can you do to cut out 50% of that and replace it with things that are actually going to nourish you? What can you start to do right now so that you're gonna have more sustainable fuel? And listen, it's always gonna be hard at first, and I guarantee you this, once you invest into it, you're gonna feel great for a long period of time. It's gonna become a pretty easy habit to keep up because you're gonna wanna feel that level of greatness. And if you feed your physical being, you will be able to also unleash your creative being. Try it out. Now, as an artist, we get inspirations everywhere, right? We have our own favorite shows, we have our own favorite IPs, our own favorite comics, our favorite artists. We have, of course, tons of amazing video games, and we have so many things that we just draw inspiration from. And then a new thing comes out and we get sucked right into that, right? And then this leads to this very lethal and very toxic trait where you're gonna start to delude yourself into thinking that that's somehow actually helping you become a better artist. Have you ever said the phrase to yourself that you're doing research by watching 26 episodes of that show, or you're doing research by playing 7 hours of this game at a time? You're really not. And I think that you're smart enough to know that, aren't you? Because really what you're doing here is that you are just inundating yourself with media consumption. And that is the next most toxic addiction that I've seen way too many artists have, and I'm speaking from personal experience. Because I used to say that somehow me playing 138 hours of Dragon Age Origins would somehow be able to contribute to me drawing that type of genre better. It did give me like a few ideas, but again, what did we learn? Ideas are pretty much worthless unless you actually get them out of your head. So this is a really nasty habit that you really need to get yourself out of. And I just want to encourage you this by asking you this simple question. What is your purpose in life? Are you going to choose to be a creator or to be a consumer? Because one is mindful and one is completely mindless. And not to say that you got to cut out one completely. No, friend. Enjoy that stuff every once in a while. But what's your ratio? What's your split? Because just to be honest, if you really feel that your purpose in life is to be a creator, it should be overwhelmingly in favor of actually creating. So what's that split? I would say it's at least 60 to 75% on you creating and less of it actually consuming. This is a really bad culture that is everywhere in the world, and it's actually the product of our conditioning. And this kind of reminds me, I've got a lot to say on this. Would you like to see an entire video about this mindset of being a creator versus a consumer? Because if so, let me know about it down below, because I'm more than happy to pump that out for you to help you out. Artists, I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that you might suffer from this next one here. So tell me a little bit about what's your sleep cycle like? Are you somebody that goes to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning? Are you somebody that goes to bed at 7 o'clock at night and then wakes up at 5:30? Are you somebody that doesn't even go to bed? Maybe you just stay up all night because that's your creative time. And then you somehow muster the strength to go to work or go to school or whatever after that like couple hours of sleep most of the time. You know what I'm talking about here, y'all. I'm talking about a very toxic sleep cycle. And this is a really nasty habit that I've seen so many artists talk about. And I've got a lot of different things to say about this. And you've probably heard this too, that honestly, like when you rest, that's when your brain actually builds what it needs to. And that's when you actually do improve and you see that sustained improvement. But the thing that I want to say about this that I think is a little unique on here is I'm going to offer some differing opinions on this matter. There are a lot of people that really push you to sleep too much too. And we don't really talk about this a lot because I'm just going to say it, but if you're like 9 to 10 hours a day on sleep, you're not sleeping because you're tired, you're sleeping because you're avoiding. And that's not going to help you either, friend, because if you're not utilizing the time that you have in a day to get to where you want to do, then you're just going to make the excuses that you probably don't want to actually make, right? And then the thing too is that if you're somebody who is a self-proclaimed night owl, are you that person, by the way? Because you're not. It's just the product of conditioning. In other words, like we are literally predisposed to being awake during the day and being asleep at night from a very biological perspective. We can't see at night, we can see in the day, all the predators come out at night, and therefore we sleep, like when you go back to prehistoric times. So don't keep telling yourself that you are a night owl because that's just the way that you're wired. That is empirically false, it's not true, and it's just a product of your own conditioning, which then means that you're also able to condition yourself into a better sleep cycle. So how much sleep should you have? Honestly, it depends on you. Myself personally, I typically function around like 5 to 6 hours of sleep. And people don't talk about this a lot too, but and I know that people don't like to hear this a lot, but it's just honest. But you know, sometimes you do have to sacrifice a little bit to get to where you want to go. Sometimes you do have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep so that you can rest easy and have a better life later. And I'm not saying that you need to like cut out sleep altogether. I don't want this misconstrued, please. What I'm just basically saying is that you have to figure out what works best for you. What can you function at? And also, how much sleep does your body actually need? Because it's different for everybody. But this extreme goes one way or the other, where you have a toxic oversleeping cycle or you have a toxic undersleeping cycle. And neither one of those is a good friend. You got to get that together and you got to experiment with it. So what would you say if I said that the fact that you're addicted to social media is your parents' fault? That's right. So basically, the way I mean by that is because there's this product of what's called mediation that's been in effect for largely the last 100 years. So just think about it like this. Typically, when you come home from school or you come home from work, what do most people do? They would sit down and they would watch TV, and then they would talk in front of a TV, and then they would exist and do their daily chores while a TV is going. And then you would go ahead and you probably eat dinner in front of that TV, and then after that you would be in front of a TV. Ever since TVs became introduced into culture, we kind of have them always present. And then what happened next? Then it was the computer, and then people were always around computers with their parents. And then it was smartphones and tablets and everything that there is right now. So from a very young age, you have been very heavily mediated towards a love of being a consumer of media. And that is a very nasty, toxic trait that we got to talk about, because what has that evolved into? Doom scrolling on social media. Are you somebody that doom scrolls on social media? Well, because most people don't actually watch TV anymore, and instead that they're on their phones. This is the effect of what you've been conditioned to do. So what you really want to ask yourself is, why are you doing that? Well, most of the time, did you know that you're just numbing yourself? You're trying to avoid doing the thing that you actually should be doing. Or here's another thing too, you get upset and then boom, you go right to social media, you start to just scroll. You don't even know what you're looking at, right? Again, it's because you're numbing yourself on that. Why this is so terrible for artists, and especially for you, friend, is because it's been literally shown in studies that it's linked to higher levels of anxiety and depression, actually forming it too. However though, of course, social media can be great and it can be helpful, and you can get inspired and you can meet up with other great artists just like yourself. It serves that purpose, and I do fully believe that you can via osmosis absorb some things that you're seeing on social media. But here's how you're gonna need to get past this. You're gonna have to limit that down. You're gonna have to recognize and be a little bit more aware, a little bit more cognizant of when you're just wasting time, when you're numbing, and when you're emotionally going for doom scrolling too. What are you feeling right then? What should you dive into? Because there's so many people that won't even go into why they feel the way that they feel, and instead they'll just look to numb themselves. That's the product of our mediation too, friend. And it's a really nasty, toxic trait that if you want to be a better artist and you want to be a better, more productive human being, you're going to have to learn to get past it. Have you ever thought of it like that? So what can you do instead of just scrolling through social media? Think about how you can have inspiration around you off of a phone. Can you get some posters? Can you have some pictures? Can you replace your desktop background on your computer or on your phone with some of your favorite artworks? Can you start to do that so that you're less drawn to social media? Can you put limits on your time too? Like I know TikTok, my wife does this. She only allows herself like an hour a day on TikTok, and it's fun, I get it for you. But the more time you're in that, the less time you're into what you actually want to do. All right, I'm gonna give you all a really hot take right now on taking breaks as an artist. And this brings into the conversation a lot of really contrasting opinions that you may or may not like, but I'm afraid you do need to hear, friend. So obviously throughout the day, yeah, you do need to take some breaks and you need to feel what your energy is like and you need to feel what you're currently feeling. So am I saying that you shouldn't take breaks? Absolutely not. But the level of physical exhaustion that you're feeling right now, I just wanna ask you all this. Where's that coming from? Because there's three types of exhaustion. First off, there's physical exhaustion. Obviously, very biological. You need a break. You're totally exhausted. Maybe you did something really hard. Maybe you did get outside and do some great activity today, right? That's physical exhaustion. If you feel that, sure, take a break. But typically, it doesn't need to be that long for it. Like a 30-minute break can just be enough to quell physical exhaustion, or just take like an hour nap. That can do it too. Then you've also got emotional exhaustion. This is where we start to get touchy here, okay? So I get it when things come up in life and things are disfavorable for you and things are sad for you too, okay? And you need to take a break from it. And then what do you do for that? And then lastly, here's another big thing too. The exhaustion of your soul. This is when you're doing things that are misaligned to what you want to do, from your passions, from your actual interests, from the things that are gonna bring you to that next level. And so then therefore, what do? Is we take excessive breaks. And every single time we start to hit that comfort zone, we're like, oh, stop, I gotta take a break. And then what do? We just only go to that wall. We only go to that wall. And then we stop and we stop. And we just keep creating just these barriers that don't exist. And we feel like we need to take a break because we're not actually exhausted. We're just feeling lost in our comfort zones. So how do we get past this? So if you're gonna go ahead and take a break, here's my advice for you to be more productive with it. First off, you need to set a limit. How long are you gonna do it? Listen, if you experience some trauma, tragedy, and bad thing in your life, listen, set a break, okay? Is it gonna take you a day? I'm gonna give myself a week. I'm gonna give myself a few days. I'm gonna give myself a month off. That's fine, but set that limit because honestly, all too often, a break turns into you making excuses to not do what you wanna do, which is in fact gonna make you wanna give up. And in fact, is not gonna feed your soul, and it's actually gonna cause your own artistic death. Which, is that gonna be good for you? I don't think so. Now, while you're here on YouTube, let me ask you this question. How many videos do you have queued up? How many do you have in your watch later? How much of those are you watching? And then, what are you doing with it later? Y'all, I can't tell you how many artists just have loads and loads and loads of videos queued up and they're watching hours and hours a day of tutorials, somehow thinking that that's gonna make them better. But y'all, that's just not the case. Come on, you know this. Like, for example, can you become an all-star NBA player by watching other people play basketball? No, you can't. So why would you think that it works that way with art? Because it doesn't, friend. So if you're gonna watch tutorials, I want you to be more purposeful. And I also want you to limit it down instead of you just watching hours and hours and hours of them on end without any purpose. Instead, focus into what is that going to do? What is that for? What project does that help me with? Because if you approach it like that, then you're actually going to be doing it in such a way that you're actually going to learn something from it and you're actually going to have something to come back to. On that note too, why don't you go ahead and make some playlists so that the next time you're lost on how to render a face or how to paint a background, you've got a separate playlist for each of those, and then you can, when you hit those walls, when you have those questions, you can go back to it. But if you're just watching loads of tutorials, you're just consuming to avoid rather than consuming to create. See how that works?
Now, all artists gotta deal with social media in some way, but did you know about the toxic price of art social media? Because I wish I knew about this earlier. Now, to kick this one off, I'm gonna ask you a really hard and really serious question. I really wish that somebody had asked me this because it's gonna change everything that you think about when it comes to social media. Why do you want that? Why do you want to build a following? And what I mean by that really simplistically is, what is it going to do? Because oftentimes I see a lot of artists that just say, well, I want a following and that's gonna open up all these amazing opportunities and it's going to allow me to have more fame. It's gonna allow me to create a job. All right, But what is that gonna do for you? And more importantly, like, what are you gonna do for somebody else? Because a big issue that I often see is that people will say, when I ask them this question, one of two responses. A, well, I've never even thought about that. Are you on this boat too? Like, have you ever even thought about why you want a following? Or B, they'll say something that is just a complete vain reason for why. I wanna have a business, I wanna make money, I wanna quit my job. Okay, great. But why? Because here's what I want to let you know. If you have vain reasons like this, then you are gonna fail, like total fail, okay? And I learned this the hard way, so learn from me, friend. A lot of times when people say that they want to follow, they're gonna be like, I want to make everybody happy, I want to inspire the masses. Okay, great. If you have that though, I'm gonna tell you this with complete certainty, you will fail. Because that is not a great reason for why you want to have a following. At the core of this, here's what you need to know is that this has to start with you. This has to start with something that's really deep and meaningful for you that then you can connect with somebody else. The fact that you want to grow to 1 million subscribers or 1 million followers just so that you can quit your job as like a daytime clerk, nobody cares about that. Like literally nobody cares about that because that's exactly the same boat that they're probably into as they're watching that. So like for me, one thing that really transformed me was when I learned about how my presence can start to serve others. So like for me on this channel right here, I'm wholly dedicated towards helping artists grow their business with giving them advice that nobody told me that's still not available online and that challenges a lot of the advice that they've heard online. So at the core of this, you gotta understand the biggest danger in giving yourself a metric like this that is outside of you, like I want money or I want fame, is that now you're gonna burn twice. Because first off, I want you to realize that you have a hole that you're trying to fill. You have that hole and it just exposed that hole and you didn't fill that hole anymore. And two, because you're gonna fail to fill that hole with people and with metrics that actually don't matter. At the core of this, you gotta have a big reason that is going to affect you. It's gonna be something measurable, and it's gonna be something I'm gonna talk to you about throughout this video for how to do this in a really healthy way. Now, why is social media such a big push? Why are so many people seeking to do whatever they can do by whatever means that's ethical and non-ethical or crazy or grounded? And why are some people succeeding and some people aren't? And here's what I learned about it. When you take a look at the life of an artist, and I'm just gonna use myself as an example here, okay? So when I was growing up, a lot of times I was talked out of being an artist. My family would be really combative with me about it. They would also be wholly dismissive of me. Have you ever felt like this too? Have you ever been told that it's juvenile or it's childish, or if you're a man, it's not manly? Or has somebody ever told you that, well, this is not something that you can do, you have to be realistic or anything like that? And I think that at the core of why a lot of artists seek to have that following is because of that lack of validation throughout your life. And it's hard to be an artist, isn't it? It's hard to live in a society, in a culture, in a state of the world right now where sometimes it feels like your art and your efforts and art in general just aren't appreciated. A big thing that you might not realize is that there's a lot of artists that are trying to do whatever they can do, and they're poisoning their efforts and they're poisoning their future by being addicted to social media and trying to build that following by whatever means necessary because they're seeking validation. But something that I learned is that you can't seek that validation, you can't seek that happiness extrinsically. In other words, you can't seek it from outside of yourself. It has to come from within. You can't find that in other people. So what if you have 1 million followers? So what if you get millions of views on whatever you're putting out there? So what if you get millions of likes? That doesn't make you feel better, friend, okay? I'm gonna tell you from experience that when you actually get those results, you're gonna wake up the next day and be like, it's still there. That's still in you. You're still gonna need that. You're still gonna crave that. And if you're not validating yourself, and I'm gonna talk to you about how you can positively do that throughout this video, then you are inevitably going to crash and burn. Surely you've seen artists that have been colossally successful and then all of a sudden disappear. Why do you think that is? So to you, my art friend, I wanna let you know that what you're doing and how you are, who you are, you're good enough. I validate you. But you need to see the value in your efforts over your results, because that's not gonna fill you up. Now consider this, my friend. You've probably never really thought about this before, but can you handle being popular? Like, can you handle what will happen when you blow up? Because I want to give you an example, okay? So I was on YouTube for about 3 years before this happened, and I finally had a video that took off. And typically I would get like a few hundred views a day, and then boom, I put out a video about AI art, and for whatever reason, like all the stars aligned, and all of a sudden, like within a week, I got like 100,000 views. So that was viral for me, and I think right about now it's sitting around about 500,000 views. So that was really good for my channel. Just judging from the metrics, everything I said probably sounds great. However though, what I did not expect was all of the blowback that I received from that video. And it was targeted and spoken specifically to artists. But I got overwhelmed by all of the AI bros that dropped into my comments from that. And they would say the most horrendous, nastiest things. And I want to submit to you, friend, this consideration. Have you ever thought about the cost of virality? Have you ever thought about what's going to happen if something that you make goes viral? Because I'm going to make this assumption. You probably bet that when something gets really big, when it blows up, when it gets more views, likes, subscribes, whatever, that you're just going to get showered with praise, right? But what if instead you're just loaded with loathing? Because that's what happened to me. And one big thing that you want to really consider, friend, is when that happens to you, how is that going to affect your mental health? Because when this happened to me, I kind of quickly realized I need to figure out really quickly how I needed to respond to this, because literally I was at work, and for like 2 full months, my phone was just blowing up with hundreds of comments from AI bros. And my initial response prior to that was always respond to every comment. But then I decided this. I'm just going to delete comments that don't align to the community that I want to make, the community I want to support, and to the overall vision of my channel. And there's a lot of people that don't feel secure about that. There are some people that think that, well, if somebody puts it out there, then who are you to silence them? But I kind of view it like this, y'all, and you can apply this to any other platform. But imagine that somebody came to your house and spray painted idiot right on your garage, like just big bold letters, boom, right across it, okay? Would you come home, look at that and be like, oh man, that's awful. I can't believe somebody wrote that. Well, that sucks. Now I gotta leave it there forever. No, you wouldn't. You would paint over it. You would get rid of it, right? Or what if somebody gave you a shirt that said, you're ugly or your art sucks? Would you then wear that shirt for the rest of your life? Of course you wouldn't. Listen, just because somebody puts it out there on the internet does not mean it's permanent, does not mean that you have to agree with it, does not mean that it needs to be something that you need to advertise. And there's a lot of creators who have encountered similar things for more prolonged periods of time that are in more fragile mental health that can't handle that. So I just want to ask you, friend, have you considered what will happen if and when that eventually happens for you, where you have something go viral and you haven't considered how that's going to affect you? Because if not, I would really start to think about that, because honestly, you're never going to be prepared for it. Now, in a similar vein of thought, I want to ask you about this. How thick is your skin? Like, how well are you going to be able to handle what people will say about this? Because one thing that I wish I knew earlier was that your critics are always going to be the loudest, and your supporters are going to be there, and they're going to be the most silent ones. That's one thing that I wish I understood, is that when you're going to be putting yourself out there, you need to think about how you're going to be able to respond to criticism, and or if that's something you even want. And more specifically on that, especially as an artist, what are you going to do when people don't like what you make? And then another version of this is, what are you gonna do when people hate what you make? Because just going back to my AI video example, I have people every once in a while drop into my comments on YouTube, or even from YouTube, they'll follow me into Instagram. Like, I've had AI bros follow me into Instagram and go through every single one of my artworks and drop just nasty comments that are just completely ill-informed. And like, yes, I would literally go through and I would delete them all. You just need to think about, like, what's your strategy going to be? What's your counter going to be for that? So when I get a really ill-intentioned critique about my artwork, I just let go of it. I just delete it. Because honestly, like, just because you put your artwork out there doesn't mean that you're seeking critique. There are places I will go to seek critique, and I will do that very purposefully. But
I'm not gonna just accept critique from people that I don't know and I don't trust and I don't validate that because I don't know what their skill level is. Because just in case you've never heard this, friend, not all critique is valuable. It depends on who is giving you that advice. Have you ever heard of that before? Now, another really hard truth is that in your branding, which should be the number one goal of yourself, trying to make yourself into a figure, trying to make yourself into somebody of influence, into somebody that can grow a following, is that inevitably you're going to have opposition. So like, for example, for my channel that you're watching me on right here, I'm all about authentic art making. I am completely opposed to AI art, and I'm okay with that. So in whatever you're doing, you have to understand that you have to be okay with being somebody who opposes something in order to do something important. Just to exemplify this philosophy, Jordan Peterson says that if you don't have something potentially a little controversial to say, or if you don't oppose something, then you're really not bringing anything to the table. You don't have anything worth saying. And that's just the truth. Now, if you would, however, love to be a loud supporter of this channel, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe, because I love to help and support y'all through everything that you're gonna do artistically. And if you want more of that every single week, come on, I'm gonna be right here for you. And now this is really gonna help you understand how to approach social media better. Now, what do you think you're making art of? And what are you making art for social media? And most importantly, why are you making that? Because I wanna ask you this, why do you think that most artists on social media burn out crazy fast? One common trend I've been watching for over a decade is how many artists blow up and then they just totally retreat like hermits. They are never seen or heard from again. Because if you're not aware of it, there's a lot of artists that pigeonhole themselves. There's a lot of artists that start to do things that maybe they don't like to do, that maybe the algorithm loves, that maybe social media loves, that platform loves. And it's bringing them a lot of success, and it's starting to bring them money. It's starting to bring them opportunities. It's starting to bring them that following. It's starting to get them those interactions. And that all sounds great, but what if that's horribly limiting for you? Or most importantly, what if that then pushes you to be inauthentic? What if you're not making the artwork that you want? What if you're now afraid to branch out into something new? What if you now become afraid to lose that audience when you shift gears from this style into that style? What if you now want to shift gears from going towards this direction to that direction, from this career to that career in your artwork, okay? And what if your audience doesn't like that? Well, guess what? Now you're a social media slave. Now you can only create things that your audience likes because your livelihood depends on it. And this just envelops you into this really toxic, vicious trap where now, instead of where you at the outset were making things that you love and then people loved it back, now you got that established following, now you've got responsibilities, now you have to make sure that you're pleasing everybody, you're being inauthentic and you're being phony. And that's when most artists on social media will completely burn out. And this is something that when I started my channel, is that I really thought to myself, like, I wanna make sure that everything that I make is never going to do that. I'm never gonna make things that I don't want to do. And even if my growth is slower, I'm totally okay with that. Like, if you watch me 10 years from now, first off, I hope I've got a gold play button. Second off, I really hope that that still rings true in the current age that you're watching me in, okay? It's because I think that one of the most important things for you to consider about is, what are you making that artwork for? Are you making it for yourself, or are you making it for other people? So which one is it for you? Or do you currently struggle with this? Now, hard question for you. Think about this. Through all the artists that you follow, or the people that you compare yourself to on social media, okay? And let me ask you this. When was the last time that any of them exposed just the worst, most horrific parts of their lives? Like, when was the last time that you watched artists go through like a divorce, or they have estranged children, or they have familial problems, or what if they're being abused, or what if they're being mistreated by their families or their spouses? Like, you obviously see that all the time, right? Oh, no, we don't. No, we don't see that. What do you see? You go online. Here's my beautiful artist studio. Here's my totally aesthetic setup. And then here's my lovely artwork. And then here's the opportunity that I got. And here's the company that I work for, right? So what's the problem here? Social media forces you to create an alternate version of yourself that is literally just the highlight reel of your life. So it's not real life, it's real life. Real, R-E-E-L. In other words, like, this is literally just the highlight of everything that's great in your life. And what that does too, for your audience, by the way, is yes, it can make them envious. Yes, it can make them follow it for you, but it also forces you to ignore the big problems and to bury the issues that you're currently going through. And this is something that honestly, like I've seen a lot of creators start to be more vulnerable with their audiences. And I think that that's actually what makes people enjoy them, because at the end of it, what we as artists do in creating our imagery and creating our artwork is that we are allowing ourselves to create a bond with somebody through an image. So in the same vein of thought, if you do want to chase social media fame, then you really need to think about this. How do you connect with other people? How do you be vulnerable with other people? How do you show your flaws? Like I've talked about this stuff in my videos. I'm talking about it with you in this video too. One thing that I definitely noticed on my channel was that when I stopped just giving just raw advice, but I started opening up a lot more about my trials, about my tribulations, about my struggles in life. This is when people started to comment more. People started to appreciate it more. People wanted to know more about it. And that's why I like to produce this type of content. It's also like highly therapeutic for me too in some kind of weird way, because maybe I get to talk about some things that I normally don't get to. And I like sharing that with you, and I like to hear your similar experiences with it. So I'm gonna encourage you on, friend, is this. Take off the mask. You don't have to present yourself perfectly. You are not the paragon of artistic perfection. So stop presenting yourself like that. It's really toxic for you, and it forces you to battle this version of yourself that you know isn't real. So as you're starting up on social media and you're looking across all of the different platforms, and you're going from Instagram to Twitter to Tumblr to DeviantArt to YouTube to TikTok, one major question that I like to ask you is this: why are you just stressing yourself out by doing all of this stuff? Because at the end of it, like, what do you have to do? You have to make posts, and then you have to make reels, and you better be making video content or else the algorithm's gonna bury you now, you know that? And then too, oh, you gotta make stories, and you gotta post and share, and oh, if you're gonna go on Instagram, oh wait, you can't just post. No, you gotta do 30 minutes of active engagement before you even think about posting anything, or else the algorithm hates you and it banishes you, right? Why are you doing all of that? And what purpose does that serve you, my friend? Because I just want to ask you this: is that your purpose, or are you distracting yourself from your purpose? Because one thing about social media that I think you really need to know, that I wish I knew about earlier, is how much it just totally twists your purpose to just pleasing machines and algorithms. The issue with this is that oftentimes artists become so inundated with metrics and measuring their success and trying to do all these strategies and doing all these extra tasks and making all these extra posts and videos that they forget that they're freaking artists. Like, you're not put on this earth to do that. And listen, it's okay if you're an artist and you don't want a social media following and you don't want to have to do all this crap. That is okay for you. But if you do want to do it, here's what I want to advise you on, is that you have to set some firm limits on yourself for what you're actually wanting to do, how much time you're going to want to do it. But the one thing too that I always try and help people understand, especially when I work with people in my mentorship, is that you need to figure out this one question: how do you do this easier? How do you make that video easier? How can you batch things easier? Like for myself, like I like to record literally like a month of content at a time, and then like I can record 4 videos in a week, and then I don't have to think about it for the rest of the month. And like right now, as I'm doing this, I'm actually recording 3 months worth of content so that I don't have to think about it again for 3 months, other than just editing it. Along with that too, just think about this: don't do anything that is going to wholly distract you completely away from your entire purpose. And if you're feeling that way, stop bemoaning it. Stop blaming social media for it and start to look inwards instead and ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? Is this how I imagine my life being? And if I do want my life to be this, how do you make it easier? Because I've gone through everything that you shouldn't do, and that's why I'm making this video for you. Now, when I first started out here on YouTube, I used to ask myself a lot of these really nasty questions that I'm gonna go ahead and take a bet that you're probably asking yourself right now, especially if you've been trying to grow a following. So I would put up a video, I would get all excited for it, and I would spend like 10 to 20 hours editing that video, trying to figure out, you know, what the best cuts were, the best music were, the best lighting for it was, does my voice sound okay? And I put that puppy out, and boom, I got like 15 views. And man, that was so demoralizing. And then I would eventually start to look at the metrics. So I'm also friendly with other YouTubers, other art YouTubers like myself that started out around the same time, and actually they came out after me and they have a lot more success than I do. And I say that from a measurable, objective standpoint. They have a bigger following, they get more views per video and all that. And then that forced me to ask myself these questions. I would feel bad about myself and I would say, well, what's wrong with me? What am I not doing? Why did they get it and I don't? And from time to time, that really got to me. And it would make me feel bad about myself. And I see a lot of artists do this too. And is this you, by the way? Because I totally know what you're going through. But then I realized this. I was just asking myself the wrong questions. And I see so many artists asking themselves demoralizing and demeaning questions, as if like you as a character, you as a human being, there's something wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you, friend. The fact is just this: you're gauging too much of your happiness on your metrics. Just because you have really big numbers in any metric will not bring you happiness, will not bring you success. Like for example, there are a ton of artists that have way bigger followings than me, and even make art commission content that have way more views that are actually very broke. Like they don't make good money on their artwork, and they're telling everybody how to make commissions and make money on it. And it's like crazy to me. And I've seen this with so many other artists who are actually very successful but have very small followings. So what I want to let you know is this: those are just vanity metrics and you should not pay attention to them. In fact, one of the things I would encourage you to do is to just learn to appreciate it. Like I appreciate every single one of you that's watching this right now. I appreciate those of you taking the time to comment to me down here with your similar concerns, with your similar struggles with this, because I think we can all relate to this. If you just focus on the appreciation for what you have in the communities that you authentically grow, being your authentic self, then you are gonna be perfectly fine and happy regardless of who watches your stuff or who views your content or who does or doesn't comment. Because honestly, like just for coming in today, man, I love y'all. It's so nice of you to take your time out of your day to share this time and this moment and this opportunity to learn a little bit more about your art with me. So for that, I appreciate you. So what do you think about that instead? So I cannot really go through an entire video on social media without also addressing one of the most popular fallacies. Have you ever been lured into social media growth for the promise of monetary gain? Like, have you ever thought about like, oh, well, if I do this, I'm going to create a business. If I do this, I'm going to get clients. If I do this, I'm going to get sponsorship. I'm going to get opportunities and be able to quit my job. Does this sound like what you were first attracted to social media growth in order to achieve? Because if so, I don't blame you. Like, it's literally everywhere. Everyone wants you to grow this big online presence and this big influence and these big followings. But I really want to let you know this. There's really not a ton of money to be made unless you are willing to commit to this for a very long time. For example, it's been almost 4 years since I started my YouTube channel, and it took me a year and a half to get monetized. And then it took me about a year from that to start to get a monthly paycheck from it. There's a lot of social media platforms that really just don't pay. Like Instagram does not pay, TikTok does not pay. The only people that make a ton of money on that, just on their followings alone, are the ones that have really insane followings, that have insane interactions, that have really, really high numbers. Like once you hit like millions of views and millions of people following you, yes, that's a great business. But just so you know, there's a big climb to get there. So if you're just always hooked and you're following that golden carrot that you think is gonna get you out of your current life situation, it's not gonna do that for a very long time. And have you ever considered this? There's no guarantee of it. Like there's absolutely nothing you can do that will guarantee your success on social media. And I want to let you know this, is that if you're placing your happiness on your success or your failure in social media, my friend, it's never going to love you back. The platform can shut down, your followers can go, you say one wrong thing, and then boom, everybody's gone like that. Social media is never going to love you back. So instead of you gauging your happiness and your success level on that, why don't you refocus it into what you actually love? Why don't you refocus it into the things that you do enjoy? Why don't you experiment and be bold with that and get people that are going to come along with you for that long ride? Have you ever thought about that? Doesn't that journey sound so much more rewarding? Because if you actually do that and you're being authentic about it, then people are going to love that and they're going to admire you for it. So can I tell you what allowed me to immediately relieve all my stress, my anxiety, and most importantly, my guilt about social media as soon as I started to do this practice because I think this is gonna help you majorly. So let me start off by asking you this. How many different social media platforms are you currently on right now? And with all of that, I'm gonna guess it's quite a few of them, okay? You probably got some inactive accounts, you probably got some active accounts. You post here, you post there, you sprinkle in, oops, I forgot about that one too. And then you take a look at what people say that you need to do in order to grow. And it is so overwhelming, isn't it? It's like, you gotta do this, you gotta make that, you have to make this reel, you have to do it so many times, post so many times a week, do this many picture posts. Oh no, don't do picture posts, only do video posts. And then you have to do this and that. It seems so impossible, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. So does this totally exhaust you with keeping up? Because here's your guaranteed way that I want you to approach it. From here on out, it's gonna make your life so much easier. Go ahead and I want you to create a hierarchy list, okay? So amongst all of your social medias, okay, I want you to start off with this. What are your top 3? Like choose, like for me personally, I have like 7 social media accounts, okay? But just to be honest, there's only 3 of them I really care about, okay? And for me personally, here's how it goes, just to give you an example. My number 1 here is YouTube. I will post on YouTube every single week. Like in almost 4 years now, I have not posted maybe a couple times, all right? I've been totally consistent every single week for about 4 years. I do at least 5 community posts every single week too. Like I am hardcore dedicated to this platform because I enjoy it the most. I enjoy making content for you. I enjoy helping you on my channel. So I'm all in on this one. My number 2 on that is DeviantArt. I post there once a week. I've been a long-term user of that community. Yes, I know that it's definitely been infiltrated by AI users a lot in the last couple of years, but nonetheless, there's still a very supportive base for it. It also happens to be where I have my next biggest following other than YouTube, and I know how to work that platform. So that's my number 2. My number 3 is Instagram. Here's why you need this, is that you need to understand your priority list and where you have to post, where you also kind of need to remember to, and where you could maybe prioritize it, but if you forget, you're not gonna be too upset about it. Like, I'm totally consistent on YouTube every single week. I am fairly consistent on DeviantArt, like once a week, like 1 post once a week, that's nothing big. And then on Instagram, like I try and post every single day, but honestly, I probably post like 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm okay with that because people that appreciate it, they're there, they show up for it and they react to it. And if it doesn't reach other people, I'm okay with that. And the reason why I want to recommend this to you is just to alleviate all of your anxiety about having to post multiple times in multiple different places every single day. It's kind of like you trying to get out of quicksand by swimming harder and faster in it. Like it's just not going to work out for you. So instead of you meandering through that volatile landscape of posting on different platforms, my friend, make it easier on yourself and just come up with your priority list. And so if you're game for this, let me know down below what those top 3 are for you and what order they are.
And now, as you're overcoming your unhealthy mindset, you might be wondering to yourself, how do I be more productive, Sean? How do I get more done? Well, my friend, I made this video series right here to go ahead and help you out with that. So go ahead and check it out. If this helped you, share it with somebody that you know. Thanks so much and see you next time.